Chapter 760. Han Yunxi had left the heavily injured Long Fei Yi at Celestial Mountain and traveled thousands of li without rest just to buy time to treat Gu Beiyue's poison. Her willingness to speak politely to these people was already giving them a lot of face. Her phoenix eyes were frighteningly gloomy. Since you don't want face, don't blame this princess for being impolite. She clearly didn't know martial arts, but the murderous aura she exuded intimidated the guards and soldiers so much that none of them dared to take a step forward. What are you all standing around for? Go after the old man, capture her, and you'll be heavily rewarded. Patriarch Xiao roared. Han Yunxi pushed Su Donglin forward and ordered coldly, Su Donglin, watch carefully. Kill anyone who dares to move. This subordinate obeys. As soon as Su Donglin obeyed, the shadow guards hiding in the surroundings all appeared. Although there weren't many of them, it was enough to intimidate everyone present. Old ghost, take me in, Han Yunxi said in a low voice. Gu had been waiting for her to say this. Desperate times called for desperate measures. He happily wrapped his arm around Han Yunxi's waist and borrowed a bit of strength to soar into the air. Dressed in luxurious red robes, the devilish red covered the sky and earth. It was very beautiful. When Han Yunxi climbed over the Duke of Qin's mansion's high walls, she heard the angry protests of several patriarchs. We want to see His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin must have been bewitched by this poison woman. If this poison woman isn't eliminated, the South will perish. This is simply a rebellion. This poison woman is openly rebelling. Where's General Bailey? Does General Bailey not care about matters? Han Yunxi hadn't even reached the ancestral hall when large groups of soldiers swarmed towards the Duke of Qin's mansion and started fighting with the shadow guards. Patriarch Xiao declared that he would attack the Duke of Qin's mansion and capture Han Yunxi to rid the people of the South. The sound of fighting was very loud. Han Yunxi had no choice but to stop and look back. Are they really fighting? The shadow guards had no problem dealing with this group of soldiers. However, once there were casualties, it would be used by people with ulterior motives to cause internal strife in the central and southern regions. In fact, ordinary people were the most vulnerable to the effects of Gu, not to mention that the situation was really bad under the comprehensive sanctions of Medical City. They were already beset with external threats. If the south-central regions had internal strife as well, the Commander-in-Chief's estate would become Cloud Realm Continent's biggest joke. Seeing that Han Yunxi was worried, Gu said impatiently, Poison girl, don't worry. Qi brother, will deal with them myself. Han Yunxi quickly stopped him. If Gu summoned the poison corpse to deal with those people, she wouldn't be able to clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. Old fiend, you don't understand the situation at the Commander-in-Chief's estate in the south-central regions. We can let the world have a handle on us, but we can't let the 5 great clans do the same, Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Fei Yi wasn't here, so how were they supposed to deal with these powerful and influential families? On one hand, there was the danger of internal strife, while on the other, Gu Beiyue couldn't wait any longer. Han Yunxi was burning with anxiety as she racked her brains. At this moment, Bailey Mingxiang hurried out of the bamboo forest in the ancestral hall and shouted from a distance, Esteemed Wang Fei, you've finally returned. Seeing Bailey Mingxiang in such a hurry, Han Yunxi didn't hesitate to rush over. How's Gu Beiyue? Esteemed Wang Fei, Dr. Gu knows you're coming back today and has been waiting for you. Esteemed Wang Fei, you should hurry over. Dr. Gu said that there's no need to worry about the matters outside. My father will bring his troops here very soon, Bailey Mingxiang said, panting for breath. Bring his troops here? Han Yunxi was a little surprised. That's right. Dr. Gu said that in times of prosperity, military might rules. In times of chaos, military might rules. His father has already brought his troops to lie in ambush nearby. When they make a bigger fuss, they'll be arrested under the pretext of insurrection, Bailey Mingxiang said seriously. Han Yunxi understood now. This was a true example of extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. The political power of the South-Central region's Commander-in-Chief's estate was restricted by the 5 great clans, but military power had always been in the hands of the Bailey Army. The Bailey Army didn't just control the navy. Long before Tianning's civil strife and Long Fei Ye's invasion of the south, the Bailey army had already taken control of the major military forces in the south and central regions and reorganized them. Even the five great clans' greatest military force was only the officers and soldiers of the local government. How could they resist an army? When reason couldn't be explained clearly and public opinion couldn't be controlled, they could only use military force to speak. Although it wouldn't last long to use military and political pressure to rule a country, it could solve the most pressing problems and buy her time to deal with Medical City and Ningcheng. Han Yunxi had been puzzled before. She'd already arrived at the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate, but she still hadn't seen General Bailey. As it turned out, everything had been predicted by Gu Beiwei and arranged properly. This fellow who only treated illnesses and people was actually more skilled in the art of healing the country. His wisdom was like his gentleness, silently moisturizing things and disappearing with a flick of his sleeve, concealing his achievements and fame. Saving him is my greatest honor. Han Yunxi left these words behind as she practically ran through the bamboo forest. Very soon, she came to a stop. Gu Beiwei was waiting for her in front of the ancestral hall. He was still sitting in a wheelchair, thin and weak, but the smile on his face was as warm as the spring breeze in April. It was enough to set her heart at ease in these chaotic times. How could there be such a person? He clearly couldn't stand up, but he wasn't in a sorry state at all. Han Yunxi thought that there was nothing in this world that could shatter the calmness in his eyes. There was also nothing filth that could stain his snow-white clothes. Han Yunxi really didn't have the heart to interrupt this peaceful moment. She wanted to stand for a while longer and look at him for a while longer, but time was of the essence. The detoxification system had long since reminded her that there was poison in Gu Beiyue's leg and had already begun to analyze the situation. The detoxification system told her that the corpse ginseng could still be cured and could still be removed. In fact, Gu Beiwei had been looking at her the entire time. He also wanted to look at her for a while longer and quietly look at her for a while. However, his eternal gaze only lasted for a moment. He was still the same as before, humbly bowing with clasped hands. Esteemed Wang Fei, you've had a hard journey. I'm sorry I'm late. Han Yunxi immediately pushed him into the room and called for an attendant to help him sit on the couch. She nimbly took out a set of gold needles and some medicine. While she was making preparations, she also discussed the poisoning situation with Gu Beiwei. She also discussed how Gu Beiwei had been using acupuncture to suppress the poison's eruption these past few days. Han Yunxi was still curious as to when Gu Beiwei learned how to use acupuncture to suppress the poison. She didn't expect that he had sealed many of the major acupuncture points in his legs, slowing down the flow of blood. If I came late, even the gods wouldn't be able to save your legs, Han Yunxi angrily said. This was the only way. Otherwise, esteemed Wang Fei wouldn't have rushed over. Gu Beiwei spoke the truth. If it wasn't for this, he wouldn't have been able to stop Han Yunxi from rushing over. There must be a spy in the manor. We must find him. How did you get poisoned? Han Yunxi seriously asked. Gu Beiwei didn't answer. Did you suddenly discover that you were poisoned? Or did you touch something? Han Yunxi asked again. Only Gu Beiwei still didn't answer. She raised her head and saw Gu Beiwei looking down at her. That pair of clean and pure eyes were so warm that it could melt a boulder. He gently placed his finger on his lips and softly said, Esteemed Wang Fei, you've never been distracted when helping people cure poisons. Shoo. No matter how restless Han Yunxi's heart was, it was instantly calmed down. That's right. When she was curing poisons, she was completely focused. She didn't allow anyone to disturb her, nor did she allow herself to be distracted. She nodded and quickly entered a state of mind. She wanted to help Gu Beiwei roll up his trousers, but Gu Beiwei was a step ahead and rolled it up himself. Esteemed Wang Fei, I've been rude. He had always been polite, and Han Yunxi was used to it. But this sentence made Han Yunxi feel alienated. She didn't answer and began to seriously search for acupuncture points. Han Yunxi didn't know that this wasn't alienation, but because he was a servant and he couldn't accept her service. Bailey Mingxiang was just about to enter when he heard Gu Beiyue's words. His heart couldn't help but ache. There was no such thing as empathy in this world, But there were people who sympathized with each other. Only those who had truly experienced it would be able to understand and see through it. Even though Dr. Gu was so modest and polite, Bailey Mingxiang could see with a single glance that Dr. Gu had feelings for Han Yunxi. Moreover, this feeling wasn't inferior to Gu's love that everyone knew. How much did he like her for him to be willing to carefully hide his feelings, never allowing himself to reveal anything? Only then would he be willing to go against his heart and show alienation again and again. Bailey Mingxiang understood this. Bailey Mingxiang silently assisted Han Yunxi, using a special medicine to remove the needles. Han Yunxi quickly found an acupuncture point and began to insert the needles. This time, she didn't use many needles, but she used them very deeply. Not long after, black blood came out of the acupuncture point and slowly flowed down Gu Beiyue's calf. Han Yunxi noticed that although Gu Beiyue's leg was thin, the muscles were firm. This should be the result of a lot of exercise. Did this fellow usually exercise a lot? This thought flashed through her mind, but Han Yunxi didn't have time to think about it. This was because the corpse ginseng's poison was hidden very deeply, and the detoxification process was very slow. Without a full day of work, it probably wouldn't be finished. She was exhausted from the journey, so she had to conserve her energy as much as possible. The bamboo forest separated them from the clamor outside the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunxi concentrated on detoxification just like before, while Gu Beiyue looked at her quietly with his head bowed. He didn't know what her world was like, but his was completely silent. Miss Yunxi, long time no see. He sighed with emotion in his heart. If they were distant, he would call her esteemed Wang Fei. If they were close, he could just call her Miss Yunxi. Only he himself knew the meaning behind this Miss Yunxi. Actually, Gu was very quiet right now as well. He was leaning against the door without making a sound. There was a bamboo forest and a high wall, completely isolating the clamor outside the door. General Bailey personally led a team of elite soldiers stationed in South Ning to surround the troublemakers. Both sides were in the middle of a discussion. It wasn't until nightfall that Han Yunxi finally managed to expel all the poison from Gu Beiyue's leg. She even gave him a few massages to unblock his meridians and move his joints. She exhaled and finally revealed a smile. Dr. Gu, it's all right now. Esteemed Wang Fei, I'm sorry I couldn't meet you at the city gates, Gu Beiyue said apologetically. He'd promised her that before. Then let me see you stand up with my own eyes. Han Yunxi said seriously. All right. Gu Beiyue's reply was full of strength. He carefully landed on the ground. Han Yunxi wanted to help him up, but he refused. He held onto the bamboo bed until he steadied himself before slowly rising to his feet. He'd stood up, very steadily. Han Yunxi's heart was filled with excitement as she finally said, Gu Beiyue, long time no see. Really, it had been a long time. Esteemed Wang Fei, once this one stands up, the commander-in-chief's estate in South Ning will never fall. Gu Beiyue said seriously. Perhaps he should make a trip back to Medical City. Chapter 761. As soon as Gu Beiyue finished speaking, Gu walked in with a chuckle. Poison lass, with Chi brother here. No one can bully you. Internal and external troubles, Medical City's pressure, Medicine City's troubles, Ning Cheng's threats, the aristocratic family's coercion, and the world's criticism. All of the pressure on Han Yunxi's shoulders seemed to disappear in an instant. Actually, she knew that there was no way she'd be able to cure Gu Beiyue's legs and go back immediately. Gu Beiyue was risking his life for them, so how could she just leave? Long Fei Yi wasn't here, so she had to stay. She had to do everything in her power to protect Long Fei Yi's empire. How great would it be if Long Fei Yi was here as well? Then they could go all out and topple this world where Medical City reigns supreme. They could break all the rules and establish their own world order. Actually, Han Yunxi didn't know that although Long Fei Yi was on Celestial Mountain, he had never stopped exchanging letters with Gu Beiyue. He'd been fighting side by side with them this entire time. More accurately, he'd been leading them all this time. We'll discuss the poison sect in detail later. I'm going outside to take a look, Han Yunxi said seriously. The situation outside hadn't dispersed yet, so she was still worried. Gu Beiyue accompanied her out of the bamboo forest and listened by the wall, not allowing her to leave. Esteemed Wang Fei, are you still worried about this one's work? Han Yunxi was speechless. She suddenly felt that Gu Beiwei was different from before, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Gu didn't have much patience to begin with, so when he saw Han Yunxi listening by the wall, he patiently accompanied her. General Bailey had used the excuse of a riot and trespassing on the Duke of Qin's estate to suppress the 5 great clans, but no one had been able to reason with a soldier like him. General Bailey displayed the meaning of the saying, when a scholar meets a soldier, he has a reason to speak clearly to the extreme. Patriarch Xiao was a smart man. He knew that the people would not fight with the officials, and the officials would not fight with the army. Although the 5 aristocratic families controlled a lot of power in the central and southern regions, they could indirectly restrain the army. For example, provisions, weapons, and so on. However, all of this had to be done in the long run. At least for the next few months, the 5 aristocratic families really couldn't do anything to the military. House Lord Xiao was the first to give in. General Bailey, is Han Yunxi really the poison sect's descendant? How much trouble will she bring to the South Central region? Why don't we sit down and discuss this? If she can convince the old man will fully support her. If she can't, then we'll make another plan. What do you think? I can't promise her, Han Yunxi said to herself. As expected, General Bailey immediately refused. He claimed that old man Tianshan Kenzo hadn't given Medical City a clear answer yet, and that the poison sect matter was purely a rumor spread by someone with ulterior motives to slander the Duke of Qin's estate. As for Gu raising poison corpses, esteemed Wang Fei had nothing to do with it. General Bailey firmly refused the 5 aristocratic families and ordered soldiers to surround South Ning City, declaring that the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate would fight Medical City to the end. With this military order, the 5 aristocratic families and the South Central region's officials knew that the situation was set. Patriarch Xiao angrily spat out, "General Bailey, just you wait. In less than 3 months, the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate will be destroyed by that woman." In truth, Han Yunxi knew very well that if she couldn't keep the medical community here, the commoners would either migrate or riot. The South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate would fall. Thus, every minute and second that followed was extremely important. On the way back, Han Yunxi had some ideas in mind. As the group sat down in a pavilion in the garden, Han Yunxi said seriously, "The most important thing right now is to withdraw the doctors. We need to find a countermeasure immediately to reduce the pressure on the medical community." Gu Beiwei said, "I've already counted. As of 3 days ago, about 80% of the South Central region's medical centers have closed. The remaining 20% are overcrowded. Midsummer is full of dysentery, so the number of patients will only increase, not decrease. This one has already sent all of Pill Fiend Pharmacy's resident physicians back, as well as contacted a few good friends. Many of their disciples are willing to come and practice medicine. However, I'm afraid they won't last more than a month or 2. This is even more terrifying than a famine." Han Yunxi hated it so much that her teeth itched. Medical City's methods were probably the first of its kind in history. A doctor had the heart of a parent, but those people from Medical City had a heart of knives. Medical skills only had one use, and that was to save lives. However, those people used it as a weapon to seek power and the allegiance of the people. This was an unforgivable crime. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment, then said seriously, "I plan to pay a high salary for the doctors. With a salary higher than that of a 5th-rank official, I'll pay the doctors a high salary every month. The medical centers will be built by the Imperial Court, and all of the medicine will be supplied by the Imperial Court. Moreover, before I announce this, I plan to acknowledge my status as a descendant of the poison sect and denounce Medical City in my own name." Han Yunxi sighed, then said coldly, "From what I understand, Medical City destroyed the poison sect just because of the idea of poison goo humans. The poison sect never committed any heinous crimes, nor did they develop a recipe for raising poison goo humans. In my opinion, Medical City destroyed the poison sect because they were using their position for personal gain to eliminate dissidents. Goo, who had been leaning against the wall in silence this entire time, immediately turned to look at Han Yunshi, his eyes dark and gloomy. It was impossible to tell what he was scheming. Bailey Mingxiang grew worried. Esteemed Wang Fei, once you acknowledge your status as a descendant of the poison sect, I'm afraid Medicine City will have no choice but to stop supplying medicine, right? Han Yunshi nodded. Medicine City's situation is very complicated. Not only do they fear Medical City, but more importantly, more than half of the elders in the new council are in favor of destroying the poison sect. However, even if I don't acknowledge it now, Medical City will still insist that I'm the descendant. Elder Wang won't be able to last until the end of the month. Han Yunshi sipped her tea, then said, I've already given orders to bring back all of the medicine from Pill Fiend Pharmacy's branches. Combined with the medicine stored in the main hall, we should be able to last the entire South Central region for about 3 months. If that's still not enough, perhaps I can discuss it with the King of Medicine. The King of Medicine had lived in seclusion for many years and had never interfered with worldly affairs. Naturally, he wouldn't give in to Medical City's whims. However, trying to take advantage of the King of Medicine wasn't something that could be accomplished with a simple beg. Han Yunshi only hoped that she wouldn't have to go that far. Gu Beiwei was about to speak when a commotion broke out outside the door. Chu Shifeng dashed over to report, Esteemed Wang Fei, something bad has happened. The 5 great clans had just left, so it was impossible for them to turn back. What kind of bad could have happened at a time like this? Han Yunshi's heart was filled with apprehension, while Chu Shifeng's expression looked like he was about to collapse. Esteemed Wang Fei, hurry and go take a look. There's a bunch of women holding babies outside. They've completely surrounded our doors. Women holding babies? What kind of situation is this? Han Yunshi's group rushed out the door, only to see dozens of women kneeling outside. They were all holding babies in their arms, ranging from infants in swaddling clothes to toddlers of 1 or 2 years old. The innocent children were all crying and wailing. Gu Beiwei was the first to notice the situation. In a low voice, he murmured, Esteemed Wang Fei, I'm afraid these children are all sick. Han Yunshi's heart almost stopped beating. She couldn't look straight at the crying children, much less their innocent eyes and innocent faces. She knew what they were here for. The leader of the group carried a 1-year-old child as she walked forward. The child's face was red with tears and snot, his face completely red from crying. Gu Beiwei rushed over and gently touched the child's forehead. How many days has he had a fever? He asked in alarm. 3 days and 3 nights. Dr. Gu, I beg you to save my child. I'd rather be sick myself than let my child suffer. I've searched all over the medical centers, but there's no doctor, and I can't get in line. Even at Pill Fiend Pharmacy, it'll take 10 days. The child can't wait. As she spoke, she turned to Han Yunshi. Esteemed Wang Fei, Medical City is heartless. We're willing to go through thick and thin with you. But the child can't bear this. Esteemed Wang Fei, I beg you to save the child. Please save the child. As soon as she finished speaking, all the women cried out in unison, Save the child, save the child. Their cries for help, mixed with the child's cries, resounded through the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate and the skies of South Ning City. Even the most heartless person would be moved. Han Yunshi's hands trembled. She wanted to comfort the crying child, but she couldn't move. She was well aware that these people had come at someone else's behest. Commoners wouldn't dare to cause a ruckus here, but everything before her eyes was the truth. Doctors shouldn't grant pleas. Han Yunshi panicked, not only because of the scene before her, but also because she wasn't completely confident that she'd win even if she openly went against Medical City. She'd only admitted to being part of the poison sect and openly went against Medical City because she'd been forced into a corner. What if she lost? Amidst the crying, Han Yunshi had a second thought. She'd confess her crimes. She'd shoulder the poison sect's groundless crimes and accept the Medical Academy's punishment instead. It had to be said that the scene before her eyes had truly shaken Han Yunshi. It was worth it to exchange her life for the millions of patients in the South Central region to seek medical treatment. Han Yunshi had never been one to compromise, but this time, she was powerless to resist her fate. Suddenly, a clear voice rang out from the side. The doctor is here. Pilfine Pharmacy has arranged for 10 doctors to specially treat the children and the elderly. There's no need to wait in a long line. Everyone, hurry and go. The one leading the line is Tianning's former imperial physician, Huang Jingming. He guarantees that everyone will be cured of their illnesses and won't take a single copper. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and saw Mu Ling standing there. She was dressed in a light yellow muslin dress that accentuated her liveliness. Beside her stood an old man who was none other than Gu Beiyue's close friend, Tianning's imperial physician Huang Jingming. The crowd had indeed come to make things difficult for Han Yunxi after receiving benefits, but it was also a fact that the child was sick. As soon as they heard the news, they all scrambled to get to Pilfine Pharmacy. Before long, the Duke of Qin's gates were empty. Mu Ling stared at Gu from a distance. She didn't rush over like before, but simply smiled at him. Her smile was especially silly and beautiful. Chapter 762. Gu had already begun to back away, but Mu Linger didn't cling to him like before. She simply smiled at him. Instead, it was Wang Gingchen who stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Esteemed Wang Fei, Dr. Gu, long time no see. Old man brought 60 disciples with him this time. 10 of them stayed in South Ning, while the remaining 50 were sent to various places to treat the elderly and young. This can be considered the best of old man's meager efforts. Han Yunxi was so moved that she didn't know what to say. If she had to be asked how she felt, the only thing she could think of was that she didn't study medicine and didn't have a group of disciples. Gu Beiyue also cupped his hands in greeting. Elder Huang, this one has been waiting for you for a long time. Elder Huang smiled. Old man helped you convince quite a few famous doctors. They'll be arriving with their disciples in the next few days, so don't worry. After Elder Huang finished speaking, he nodded at Han Yunxi before turning to head back to Pilfine Pharmacy. Han Yunxi's cold heart finally warmed up. She knew that there were still many good doctors in this world. After Huang Gingchen left, Mu Linger still didn't come over. She giggled and said, "Don't worry. Leave Pilfine Pharmacy to me and Dr. Huang." After she finished speaking, she winked at Gu and left without saying another word. Gu was quite surprised and secretly sighed in relief. Pilfine Pharmacy was very busy and had many patients waiting for her to treat. Since she was a medical practitioner, she could still treat some minor illnesses. She didn't have time to waste here at a time like this. She thought that since she was clinging on to Qi Brother, and Qi Brother wouldn't like her, she should hurry back to Pilfine Pharmacy and fight against Medical City. She didn't like Medical City to begin with, so when she found out that Qi Brother was Gu Qi Sha, who had been banished by Medical City, she hated Medical City even more. After walking far away, she couldn't help but turn back and shout, "Qi Brother, take the poisoned corpses and destroy Medical City. Ling, or will always support you." Silly girl. Gu smiled helplessly. This girl supported Han Yunxi's refusal. Although Elder Huang had brought many doctors to help, their help was limited. "Dr. Gu, our chances of winning aren't high." Han Yunxi was telling the truth. Who knew that Gu Beiyue would say, "Esteemed Wang Fei, if you hand yourself over, you can save the innocent people for a while, but you can't save them forever. You don't need to feel guilty, and you can't waver. We must take this opportunity to change the rules of Medical City. That is the purest school and has nothing to do with power." Han Yunxi did not expect that Gu Beiyue actually understood her. He could actually tell what she was thinking. His eyes weren't sharp at all, but gentle and soft. Still, they could see through everyone's hearts. "Gu Beiyue, you can treat illnesses, people, and the country, but you can also treat the heart?" Gu Beiyue continued, "Esteemed Wang Fei, our chances of winning are very high. The Apricot Woods Conference will be held in a few days, and this one will attend it." The Apricot Woods Conference was held once every 5 years. It was the highest meeting of Cloud Realm Continent's medical community and a platform to compete in medical skills. Through this competition and display of medical results, a doctor's rank would be determined once again. Under normal circumstances, those below the 5th grade of Divine Doctor would have to be evaluated through a competition. There was a limit to the number of people allowed. As for the 4 grades of Divine Doctor, and Divine Doctor, they would be evaluated through the demonstration of their medical achievements. Once a doctor obtained a rank, they would receive many benefits from the medical academy. For example, they could study under high-ranked doctors, come into contact with medical skills that weren't taught to outsiders, or receive subsidies from the medical academy for their research. Even without these benefits, the mere title of a doctor was enough to make many people scramble like ducks. In Cloud Realm Continent, a doctor's rank was the proof of one's medical skills. It was the recognition of one's profession and a glorious title. Han Yunxi had always known that Gu Beiyue's medical skills weren't just a 5th-ranked divine doctor. She also knew that Gu Beiyue had always disdained the different ranks of the medical academy, so he hadn't gone for one yet. Now that he was going to attend the Apricot Woods Conference, was he going to show off his true skills? Esteemed Wang Fei, this one is planning to challenge Academy head Gu Yuntian. I'm just afraid that esteemed Wang Fei won't trust me. Gu Beiyue actually smiled at such a serious topic. Han Yunxi's heart pounded in her chest. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't looking forward to it. Although she didn't know where Gu Beiyue got his confidence from, she knew that his words were definitely reliable. I trust you, Han Yunxi said with certainty. The reason why Medical City had such a high appeal in the medical field was that the medical school represented the highest level of medical skills and abundant medical resources. If Gu Beiyue challenged Gu Yuntian's authority, and if Gu Beiyue expressed his willingness to take him in as a disciple, what would the result be? Even if they couldn't shake the medical academy, they could at least fight for more doctors. Han Yunxi finally saw hope. Gu chuckled. Gu Beiyue, I never expected you to have designs on the Apricot Woods Conference as well. This old man has my eyes on it as well. As long as you get rid of that old thing Gu Yuntian, this old man promises that the position of head of the medical academy will be yours. Gu, you have something on Gu Yuntian, don't you? Han Yunxi asked anxiously. Gu was the head elder's adopted son and very familiar with the poison sect. She guessed that Gu must know something, or else he wouldn't be so arrogant. Gu turned back with a flirtatious smile. It's a secret. Han Yunxi had no idea of Gu's relationship with the medical academy, nor did she know how much suffering Gu had suffered there. She couldn't help but laugh when she saw his flirtatious smile. Gu, tell me the truth. Are you from the poison sect? Pa. Gu was very agitated. Han Yunxi, this old man won't be your relative. It doesn't matter if you're not from the poison sect. You'll still be my relative when you marry Ling or one day, Han Yunxi said seriously. Gu's mouth twitched as he pretended not to hear. Han Yunxi knew exactly what Gu was thinking, but what else could she do besides turn him down with a joke like this? When discussing matters with this guy, she always had to be half joking. If she spoke too seriously, he would always refute her on the spot and snort disdainfully, refusing to take it to heart. There's an important matter. Let's go inside and talk. Gu Beiyue cut short their banter. Han Yunxi knew that there was another big problem besides withdrawing. Ning Cheng. When they returned to the room, General Bailey had already arrived from the back door. The redcoat cannons had forced the Tian-An's Mu family troops to retreat. Ning Cheng hadn't pursued the Tian-An's position in the 3 western cities, but had immediately withdrawn his troops. The Tian-An troops had suffered heavy casualties, so Ning Cheng had only left behind a third of his artillery and 2 border garrisons. Half of the remaining troops had been sent to the Western Front to deal with the Chu clan troops, while the other half was heading south to prepare for the attack on the south-central region's commander-in-chief's manor. General Bailey explained the situation on Ning Cheng's side, then said, even if Northern Li manages to find war horses today, it'll take at least a month or 2 before they could be used. This general is planning to send troops north on the day of the Apricot Woods Conference. The land and navy will work together to divide Ning Cheng's forces. Water army? Han Yunxi was doubtful. Yes. There's a large river in Tianning called the Sand River. It flows from western Zhou in the west to the Eastern Sea in the east. If Tianning's troops want to go south, they'll have to cross this river. As long as we buy enough time to take Tianning's Helen Prefecture, we'll be able to control the river. Once we control it, it won't be so easy for Tianning's troops to go south. We can drag things out until Northernly sends out their troops, General Bailey said seriously. Han Yunshi immediately understood. This was called gaining the initiative by striking first. If they were destined to fight Ning Chung, then it was better to wait until Ning Chung dealt with Western Zhou before sending out their troops. They could even use Western Zhou to divide Ning Cheng's forces. Moreover, if they sent out their troops now, it would definitely catch Ning Chung off guard. The first battle would catch Ning Chung unawares. After all, Long Fei Yi was still on Celestial Mountain. Everyone assumed that they'd wait for him to make a move after he left the mountain. Medical City had Gu Beiwei and Gu's help, so there was still hope. Ning Chung had General Bailey keeping him in check. No matter what, Han Yunshi thought, they could at least stabilize the situation and buy time for Long Fei Yi. Han Yunshi had no idea that Gu Beiwei's decision to attend the Apricot Woods Conference at Medical City and General Bailey's preemptive strike were all because of Long Fei Yi's orders. That man might be far away on Celestial Mountain, but he still had control over everything. Han Yunshi discussed a few more details with everyone before realizing that it was already late at night. Everyone was still hungry. Zhao Mama, have the kitchens prepare some food, Han Yunshi instructed. General Bailey didn't stay for dinner and took his leave to attend to military affairs. Gu wouldn't leave. He'd forgotten how long it had been since he'd eaten at the same table as Poison Lass. He found several jugs of fine wine and said, "The last time the three of us ate at the same table was several years ago. Even now, Long Fei has sealed up my restaurant. Dr. Gu just recovered from his injuries, so he can't drink. Mingxiang, and I don't know how to drink, so you can drink by yourself," Han Yunshi said seriously. Gu rolled his eyes at her. "Spoil sport?" Han Yunshi ignored him and asked Gu Beiwei seriously. "Tomorrow, we'll make some preparations and tell them everything we need to tell them. The night after tomorrow, we'll leave secretly. How about it?" Gu Beiwei nodded. He hesitated for a while before saying, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this humble one has been communicating with His Highness the Duke of Qin these past few days and learned that His Highness is seriously injured. This humble one has a set of acupuncture techniques that are extremely effective in treating internal injuries." "Really?" Han Yunshi was overjoyed. Gu Beiwei's acupuncture techniques were definitely top-notch. Amen. Gu Beiwei was still hesitant, but he still said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this humble one can't personally go to Celestial Mountain to perform acupuncture for His Highness the Duke of Qin. Why don't you teach it to someone you trust and have them do it for you?" Han Yunshi couldn't wait for Long Fei Yi's injuries to recover quickly. Every day counted. "Sure," she immediately agreed. Gu Beiwei was about to say Bailey Mingxiang when Han Yunshi pulled Bailey Mingxiang over. "Let's have Mingxiang. She learns quickly, so 2 days shouldn't be a problem." Bailey Mingxiang was very surprised. She couldn't believe her ears. Her heart pounded wildly. If esteemed Wang Fei hadn't held her hand tightly, her hands would have been trembling. Heavens! She actually wanted to go to Celestial Mountain to perform acupuncture for His Highness the Duke of Qin. She reflexively looked to the right. Although Su Xiaoyu wasn't there, she seemed to see Su Xiaoyu standing there. Those bright eyes were filled with hostility and suspicion as they stared at her. Chapter 763. Su Xiaoyu wasn't here, so the cold eyes that were examining Bailey Mingxiang were her own. How could she not know that this was an opportunity that could only be encountered by chance? Even if she couldn't treat His Highness Duke of Qin, she would be satisfied to be able to serve him. Or rather, even if she didn't serve him, as long as she could watch him from afar, she would die without regrets. But she couldn't. She wasn't willing to let her greed stain the purest faith in her heart, the purest unrequited love. She looked at Gu Beiwei and discovered that Gu Beiwei was also looking at her. "Gu Beiwei, do you understand? Do you really understand?" A child's intuition was the most accurate, and a child's eyes were the sharpest. That was why Su Xiaoyu had seen through him. But what about Gu Beiwei? If she couldn't hide it from him, if they were truly in the same boat, why didn't he understand? Why did he still want to send her to Celestial Mountain? That shouldn't be the case. Actually, this was a form of harm. Bailey Mingxiang took a step forward and bowed. Esteemed Wang Fei, Imperial Physician Gu, Mingxiang is untalented. I'm afraid I won't be able to learn acupuncture techniques, so I ask that the two of you find someone else to entrust this heavy responsibility to. She refused. Before Han Yunxi could speak, Gu Beiwei said, "No matter. This one guarantees that I can teach you in 2 days. This one has already discussed this with His Highness Duke of Qin. You're the most suitable candidate." Bailey Mingxiang was stunned. This was actually His Highness Duke of Qin's intention? Han Yunxi was also surprised. "You've already discussed this?" His Highness Duke of Qin originally wanted esteemed Wang Fei to return to Celestial Mountain, but unfortunately, I'm afraid that esteemed Wang Fei will have to follow us to Medical City, Gu Beiwei said seriously. If someone else had said this, Han Yunxi might have hesitated, but she had never doubted Gu Beiwei's words. Esteemed Wang Fei, Miss Mingxiang is truly the most suitable candidate, Gu Beiwei added. Han Yunxi immediately thought of Bailey Mingxiang because she was the most suitable candidate. Firstly, Bailey Mingxiang had learned a lot of acupuncture techniques from Gu Beiwei. She was talented and had a good foundation. Secondly, the most important thing was that she was Long Fei Ye's confidant. If there was a traitor, who else would he look for other than the Bailey clan? The people of the 100 Lane clan were the least likely to betray Long Fei Yi. And Long Fei Yi was seriously injured at the moment. So, they couldn't afford to make even the slightest mistake. Moreover, they couldn't afford to leak any information. If Han Yunxi wanted to find someone who could quickly learn the needle techniques and be absolutely loyal to Long Fei, she wouldn't be able to find anyone. Of course, Mu Linger was also a candidate, but Mu Linger still had to manage Pilfine Pharmacy. Moreover, that girl was deathly afraid of Long Fei Yi and would never accept this task. They also didn't have the right to order her around. Mingxiang, you won't obey my orders, but are you going to defy His Highness' orders? Do you want me to invite your father over? Han Yunxi asked teasingly. Bailey Mingxiang had nothing to say. She was at a loss, and her heart was filled with apprehension and unease. She didn't say anything, so Gu Beiwei took it as her agreement. Miss Mingxiang, go back and rest early. Come to my place tomorrow morning to learn acupuncture. All right. Bailey Mingxiang turned to Han Yunxi and said, since esteemed Wang Fei trusts me so much, Mingxiang definitely won't disappoint esteemed Wang Fei. Han Yunxi nodded and muttered, he's really been seriously injured this time. I can only hope that he recovers quickly. Before Bailey Mingxiang left, she asked, esteemed Wang Fei, is there any news of little Yu? Although she felt like someone was watching her every day when Su Xiaoyu was still around, she'd been mocked and ridiculed every now and then. But the girl had been missing for so long that the Duke of Qin's estate was so quiet that she wasn't used to it. Han Yunxi sighed softly. I'm still looking for her. Don't worry. Rest early and focus on your acupuncture lessons tomorrow. After Bailey Mingxiang left, only Gu Beiwei, and Chu Shifeng were left in the room. Han Yunxi asked, Dr. Gu, where did you get this poison? Gu Beiwei took out a poison needle and said, it was an assassination. It didn't seem like they wanted to kill me, but lure esteemed Wang Fei down the mountain. Han Yunxi immediately looked towards Chu Shifeng, who hastily reported, there are 2 possibilities. 1, an expert snuck in and avoided our defenses. 2, there might be spies among the people in the estate. Either way, this person must be in cahoots with the spies on Celestial Mountain. They knew His Highness Duke of Qin was heavily injured and lured esteemed Wang Fei down the mountain to incite discord in Carefree City against esteemed Wang Fei. Chu Shifeng's words were exactly what Han Yunxi had guessed over the past few days. Could this person be the one who kidnapped Su Xiaoyu? Why did they kidnap little Yu? Han Yunxi didn't understand. Little Yu had been missing for a long time. If these people wanted to take her hostage for ransom, shouldn't they have made a move by now? Chu Shifeng didn't answer, but said seriously, esteemed Wang Fei, the enemy is in the shadows while we're in the light. It's better to be cautious. His Highness must have a plan to deal with the spies. Medical City is more important right now. This subordinate will send more men to protect you all there. Gu, who had been silent all night, gave a soft snort at these words. Save it. Chu Shifeng wasn't convinced and glared at him. Before the two of them could start arguing, Gu Beiyue cut them off. Everyone, it's getting late. Let's all rest. Esteemed Wang Fei must be tired from the carriage ride, so hurry and go back. Han Yunxi really was tired. There was still a pile of things to do tomorrow. She and Gu Beiyue were both leaving, while General Bailey was preparing to send out troops. They had to make proper arrangements for the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. They couldn't let the rear be emptied out while they fought on the front lines. Fortunately, General Bailey's sons were all capable. For the time being, they could still intimidate the 5 great clans with their military might. Han Yunxi didn't return to the leisurely Cloud Pavilion, but went to Long Fei Ye's quarters. Besides their wedding night, she'd never spent a night in his quarters. Tonight, she'd only come because she coveted the scent he'd left behind in the palace. She hoped that the familiar scent would give her a good night's sleep. Actually, she was long tired, but not sleepy. After Granny Zhao lit the lamp, she asked Granny Zhao to leave. She wandered around the empty palace by herself. Everything in this quarters was the same as the one in Tianning's capital city. Han Yunxi wasn't sure if Long Fei Yi was nostalgic and used to living here, or if he was too lazy to get used to his new quarters. When she'd married into the Duke of Qin's estate and been brought to his quarters, she'd done the same thing as now. But her feelings were completely different then. Back then, she'd been fearful, cautious, and curious. Now, she only felt longing. Perhaps it was because he hadn't lived here for too long, but she couldn't find any familiar scent. Even the luxurious silk quilt on the wide bed didn't give her any warmth to feel at ease. Han Yunxi curled up in the quilt by herself, unable to fall asleep no matter how hard she tried. She secretly laughed at herself for recognizing the bed. But how could she recognize the bed? Even in the carriage, on horseback, and in his arms, she could still fall asleep. She clearly recognized the person. Since she wasn't sleepy at all, she decided not to sleep. Instead, she lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. Did Long Fei Yi toss and turn like this when he slept here? Did he stare at the same ceiling? What did he look like when he was asleep? What kind of sleeping position was he used to? Did he sleep on his back, on his side, or on his stomach? Was he more used to sleeping on his left or right side? Han Yunxi wasn't sleepy at all, but her thoughts were running wild. She rolled to her right side to lie on her stomach, then rolled to her left side to lie on her back. If only he was here, how good would that be? After tossing and turning, Han Yunxi finally got off the bed. She really missed Long Fei Yi. At night, people would become emotional. She came to the study and found that the chair behind the desk was facing the window. No one would dare to touch anything here. She was afraid that Long Fei Yi sat with his back to the desk last time. She didn't understand why he was sitting with his back to the desk. Was there anything to see outside the window? She didn't think too much about it. She straightened the chair and sat down. She picked up the brush and wrote a letter. Thousands of thoughts, thousands of words, and surging longing all gathered at the tip of the brush, but only 6 words were left on the paper. It didn't have the talent and tactfulness of the ancients, but it was the most moving confession in the world. Long Fei Yi, I miss you. She folded the letter neatly and put it in the envelope, signing the word she. She opened the window and wanted to summon an eagle to deliver the letter. However, the moment she opened the window behind her, she was stunned. Soon, her eyes were filled with tears. Tears welled up in her eyes and almost fell. Looking at the scene in front of her, her past hardships, grievances, torment, and even her inferiority complex seemed to disappear. For the first time, she truly felt that her love wasn't humble at all. After staring blankly for a long time, Han Yunxi put the chair back to its original position. She sat down and looked out the window. She just happened to see the window of the leisurely Cloud Pavilion. Under the bright moon, even without the lights, the leisurely Cloud Pavilion was clearly visible. Countless nights, she stood there alone and stared blankly at the lights in his bedroom. She always admitted that she fell in love with that man first, but she didn't expect that he had always been watching over her in a corner that she couldn't see. Long Fei Yi, you fool! Han Yunxi smiled bitterly. It was only now that she realized why he had built another Duke of Qin's manor, another sleeping palace, and another leisurely cloud pavilion, without moving a single blade of grass or tree. So it was all for this coincidental angle of view, this angle of view that she was unaware of. Long Fei Yi, you and I, who is more humble? Perhaps we are both humble, willing to lower our heads and condescend to each other. Han Yunxi opened the letter again and added, Long Fei Yi, you fool. Then she summoned an eagle to send the letter out. That night, she sat on the chair and stared at the window of the leisurely cloud pavilion. Unknowingly, she fell asleep. For countless nights, Long Fei Yi also leaned on the chair and stared at the beautiful figure in the leisurely cloud pavilion as he fell asleep. After Han Yunxi fell asleep, Lil Thing secretly slipped out of the poison storage space. Han Yunxi could vaguely sense it, but she didn't make a sound. She knew that Lil Thing hadn't returned to South Ning for a long time, so it must have gone to find Gu Beiyue. If not for the fact that Gu Beiyue didn't know how to cure poisons, she would have suspected that Gu Beiyue was also from the poison sect. Why did Lil Thing like him so much? However, Gu Beiyue was truly likable. His temperament was clean, and his personality was very gentle. Being with him didn't bring about any great joys or sorrows, but it was very comfortable. It was like basking in the sun on a winter day. Unknowingly, a lifetime passed. Chapter 764. Lil Thing had been seriously injured last time, but it wasn't as bad as the loss of its detoxification blood. Even though it was recuperating in the poison storage space, it could still sense Mama Yunxi's thoughts and hear what was said in the outside world. By the time Mama Yunxi returned to the Duke of Qin's estate, it had already woken up. That was because it had smelled the gentleman's scent, the purest scent in the world. Only the purest of souls had such a pure scent. Lil Thing was still a tiny thing, only the size of a palm. It was fluffy and snow-white like a little fur ball. Actually, it had wanted to come out long ago but lacked the strength. It took a lot of effort to jump out of the poison pond and out of the poison storage space. After jumping out the window, it ran straight for the ancestral hall through the window it was most familiar with. As expected, it saw the gentleman lying on his side on the bed. He was dressed in white undergarments and half covered by a silk quilt. His long hair was scattered behind his head and spread out on the pillow. Sleeping, he was even gentler and calmer than when he was awake. He lacked his usual strict modesty and even exuded traces of laziness that Lil Thing had never seen before. It was impossible to imagine what a man like this would look like if he dropped all etiquette and assumed a lazy, casual posture. Gentlemen, just what kind of person are you? Lil Thing sat on the table and stared blankly at the gentleman's face. The more it looked, the more familiar it felt, as if it had seen him somewhere before. How could that be? Had it been the gentleman before? Had it forgotten? It really was forgetful, but the gentleman was only in his 20s. It couldn't have forgotten things from that time, right? Lil Thing carefully thought back and realized that it really wasn't remembering much. Perhaps it had been locked up for too long and only remembered that little black room. It was boring and dry, so there wasn't much to remember. In another 2 hours, it would be daybreak. Lil Thing jumped onto the bed and snuggled up in the gentleman's arms before finding a comfortable spot to sleep. The Duke of Qin's estate was as quiet as the moon in the sky. Currently, Mu Linger was sitting by herself on the back steps of the Duke of Qin's estate. Chu Shifeng had bumped into her while patrolling the area. Originally, he wanted to tell her that Gu Qixiao was sleeping soundly on a nearby rooftop, basking in the moonlight. But after some hesitation, Chu Shifeng decided not to stick his nose into other people's business. Chu Shifeng really disliked Gu. He felt that a good girl like Mu Ling shouldn't be wasted on a scum like Gu. For some reason, he suddenly thought of young Master Tang. Even though Tang Li was now the head of the Tang clan, Chu Shifeng was still used to calling him young Master Tang. He remembered that young Master Tang had once been very interested in the genius pharmacist of Medicine City's Mu family. How did he end up in the hands of that slut, Ning Jing? He wondered if young Master Tang had taken down Ning Jing. The war was about to begin, and the arms trade was very important to them. Mu Linger was lying on her knees, half asleep. In fact, she was already exhausted. She busied herself until the wee hours of the night, before she finished seeing all the patients and taking stock of all the medicinal ingredients. She was supposed to be sleeping in her bedroom in the back courtyard of Pill Fiend Pharmacy, but she ran all the way to the Duke of Chen's estate without even taking a sip of water. When she reached the entrance and saw the tightly shut back door, she suddenly realized that it was late at night. Everyone had dispersed and gone to bed, so she wouldn't be able to see Chi brother anymore. She didn't know why she was sitting here either. So what if she had to wait until daybreak? She might as well go back to Pill Fiend Pharmacy and keep busy. However, she just sat down. Once she sat down, she did not think about it anymore. Perhaps she still had a little bit of hope in her heart. She hoped that Chi Gidge would enter through this door. Chi brother often appeared and disappeared like a ghost too. He ran around in the middle of the night, didn't he? Chi brother, last time you left, you didn't even say goodbye to Ling Er. Now that you're back, aren't you going to see her? Although Ling Er isn't anyone to you, she's still a friend you've known since you were young. Chi brother, just what do you take Ling Er for? That night, Mu Ling Er didn't see Gu. When the sun rose, she didn't slack off. She stretched lazily and returned to Pill Fiend Pharmacy to begin her busy day. She didn't even notice that her knees were wet. When the first ray of sunlight shone into the study and hit Han Yunxi's face, Han Yunxi immediately woke up. The sunlight dispelled the darkness and coolness of the sleeping quarters. Han Yunxi checked her poison storage space and confirmed that Lil Thing wasn't there. Her schedule today was packed. She had to go to Pill Fiend Pharmacy, the Bailey Army's headquarters, and the Commander-in-Chief's manor. There was a pile of work waiting for her to deal with in each place. But just to be on the safe side, she decided to go to Gu Beiwei's place to see if Lil Thing was there. As soon as she entered, she saw Gu Beiwei talking to Lil Thing. Gu Beiwei spoke very softly. She didn't know if Lil Thing understood him, but it nodded repeatedly in response. The man and the squirrel didn't seem out of place at all. In fact, there was an indescribable harmony between them. Sure enough, it's with you. Han Yunxi smiled. It snuck over last night. I only found out this morning. Gu Beiwei smiled. He held Lil Thing in his arms and gently stroked it. This little guy might be fated to be with me. It likes to stick to me. Isn't that so? It's still injured. Instead of being obedient and recuperating, it only knows how to run over to your place to play. Although Han Yunxi's tone was reproachful, her heart ached for Lil Thing. The scene from Celestial Mountain would occasionally appear in her mind. She couldn't imagine if she would still be alive if it weren't for Lil Thing. She knew Lil Thing was good at jumping and running, but never expected it to transform into a big white wolf with such explosive strength. She took Lil Thing from Gu Beiwei's arms and gently stroked it. Lil Thing rubbed itself against her hand intimately. You've never seen it transform, right? Han Yunxi grinned. It's a big white wolf. You might be frightened. Lil Thing seemed a little dissatisfied as it lazily glared at Han Yunxi. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't see it. Mama Yunxi, please don't ruin my image in front of the gentleman like this, all right? Gu Beiwei wasn't surprised or alarmed. Instead, he smiled faintly. It's a snow wolf. Its fur is as white as snow, pure and holy. Esteemed Wang Fei, since you're a descendant of the poison sect, the poison beast will protect you with its life. It'll live and die with you. Snow wolf, that's right. Han Yunxi nodded. She picked up Lil Thing and intimately pressed her face against it. Lil Thing patted her lightly with its meaty paws, amusing Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi grinned. Dr. Gu, since Lil Thing likes you so much, I'll give it to you when it recovers so it can protect you. How does that sound? Gu Beiwei was a doctor without the strength to truss a chicken. He really needed protection. Lil Thing's eyes immediately lit up as Gu Beiwei chuckled. I like it too. I can borrow it to relieve my boredom from time to time, but I'm afraid I can't afford to have it as a gift. Lil Thing didn't hear the rest of his words. It only heard the gentleman say, I like it too. Sir, you know Lil Thing likes you, and you like Lil Thing too. But why can't we be together? Just as they were talking, a servant came to report that Bailey Mingxiang had arrived. Han Yunxi didn't want to delay Gu Beiwei's teaching of acupuncture. So she handed Lil Thing to Gu Beiwei and left after greeting Bailey Mingxiang. Long Fei Yi received Han Yunqi's letter as well as Gu Beiyue's. No matter how important Gu Beiyue's letter was, he still opened Han Yunqi's first. However, he didn't expect there to only be 2 sentences in the letter. Long Fei Yi, I miss you. And Long Fei Yi, you fool. He rubbed his brows with one hand while holding the letter with the other. After reading it for a long time, the joy in his heart transformed into a soundless smile. The ink in his study was an extremely precious Jianshan ink. It had a unique fragrance, so he knew she'd gone to his study. He was so engrossed in his reading that he hastily put away the letter when the old man from Kinzo scooted over. In the end, his joy was replaced by seriousness. Long Fei picked up his brush and wrote a few words on the back of the paper. Looks like it's no big deal, the old man from Kinzo teased. Long Fei Yi ignored him and waited for the ink to dry before carefully folding the letter and placing it back in the envelope. Seeing this, the old man from Kinzo didn't understand. Fei, you're not mailing it out? No need, Long Fei Yi replied mildly. What did you write when you replied, but didn't mail it out? The old man from Kinzo was curious as well. Perhaps only his disciple would be. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi automatically ignored the old man from Kinzo's question. He put the letter away before opening Gu Beiyue's letter. Gu Beiwei had explained the situation at the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate very clearly. He also mentioned that once everything was settled, Bailey Mingxiang would come to Celestial Mountain. This time, the old man from Kinzo scooted over again. Long Fei Yi didn't avoid him, but handed the letter to the old man from Kinzo. Bailey Mingxiang? The old man from Kinzo hesitated before asking, can this woman be trusted? She's a member of the Mermaid clan. Of course she can be trusted. Don't worry, Long Fei Yi said. Treat her injuries with acupuncture? That girl believes such things? The old man from Kinzo was amused. He always thought Han Yunqi was very intelligent. She's often stupid. Long Fei Yi's tone was doting as he spoke. After a while, he sighed softly. She's never doubted Gu Beiyue's words. I'm just afraid that she'll be so stupid that she won't believe you, the old man from Kinzo intoned. Actually, Long Fei Yi hadn't told the old man from Kinzo that Han Yunqi was a descendant of Western Qin's imperial clan. Right now, even Chu Shifeng and Tang Li were in the dark. After Mute Granny's death, he was the only one who knew the truth. That was the most difficult thing for him to control. Long Fei Yi didn't reply. Seeing the seriousness in his eyes, the old man from Kinzo didn't ask any questions. He quickly went to invite the honored elders to treat Long Fei Yi's injuries. When he said that it'd take 1.5 years to recover with internal energy, it was all for the sake of the spy. With the help of the honored elders and his own foundation, Long Fei Yi's injuries would heal in a month at most. Actually, he'd woken up during the 5 days that the honored elders had treated him. He knew that Han Yunqi was waiting bitterly by the door, but he'd steeled his heart and refused to see her. If Han Yunqi hadn't been heartbroken, how could the spy have believed that he was seriously injured? The ambush from the Duke of Qin's estate, the spy from Celestial Mountain, the person who instigated He Ilian, the person who knew he possessed the lust-bite energy, and the mastermind behind the scenes trying to control everything. He long had his eyes on him. Chapter 765. After the honored sir helped Long Fei Yi heal his injuries, his complexion looked much better. He should have gone outside to get some fresh air, but now he had to stay in bed. There were many servants selected from the Sky Mountain disciples in Jiushuan Palace. Most of them were chosen to be servants when they were around 10 years old. Kinzo would teach them swordsmanship, but he would only teach them a little and not really teach them anything. Although he knew there was a spy, Long Fei Yi did not investigate. Firstly, he was afraid of alerting the enemy. Secondly, there was no need to. Thirdly, he wanted to beat them at their own game. He Ilian was an excellent example. Someone raised by that old fox behind the scenes would not betray his master so easily. Long Fei hadn't done a thing, but he'd already arranged everything in silence. His methods were always capable of catching people off guard. At this time, He was lazily leaning on the bamboo bed with his hand over his heart. The letter from before seemed to be hidden there. Kinzo was afraid he would be bored, so he came to accompany him. In fact, Long Fei was a very boring person. If there was no need to talk, he could go for days without saying a word. Kinzo had watched him grow up and knew his personality very well. In fact, Kinzo was the one who was bored and came to find Long Fei to relieve his boredom. Some people could not be bored. If they were bored for too long, their heart would get sick. Gu Beiwa was about to take out Han Yunxi's letter when Kinzo came in. He moved his hand away and pretended to be asleep. Kinzo was already sitting in front of him, but he still did not move. Kinzo coughed a few times and said, "There is still no news about the medicine you asked for last time. However, old man recently received a medicinal pills." Before he could finish, Long Fei immediately opened his eyes. Last time, he asked Kinzo how to treat Duanmu Yao's internal injuries and mentioned Gu Beiyue's condition. Kinzo told him about a medicine called the Dragon Pill returning. Unfortunately, he still couldn't find it. "What about medicinal pills?" Long Fei asked seriously. Weren't you asleep?" This Gu Beiyue. The Kinzo man's expression turned ambiguous. It's a good thing he's not a girl. Otherwise, if you weren't so nervous, that last Yinchi would definitely get mad at you. Faced with such a question, Long Fei only shot the sword sect master a disdainful glance. What else could he do? After mocking the old Kinzo, he lay back down and continued to sleep. "Your wings are getting harder and harder." Kinzo chuckled. "I just received a medicinal pills called Phoenix Perch. Give them to that Sir Gu first and let him recover on his own. It shouldn't be a problem for him to recover 20 to 30% of his martial arts in a short period of time." Long Fei's eyes lit up at these words. He immediately rose to his feet and said, "All right, I'll write a letter right away." Kinzo man saw him in such a hurry and couldn't help but remind him, "Fei, you should think this through clearly. Once this person recovers, his martial arts might even surpass yours and mine. It's hard to know what's in a person's heart. Moreover, this person is Western Qin's most loyal servant. You and him are like fire and water." Long Fei had already finished writing the letter. As was his habit, it was short and concise, but he raised his head to look at the sword sect master and seemed to hesitate as well. "Think it over some more," Kinzo man coaxed. Long Fei thought it over for a long time before finally reaching out his hand. Although he didn't say a word, Kinzo man understood his intentions and could only hand over the medicinal pills. After delivering the letter, Kinzo man's expression was especially solemn. Long Fei, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. He found the shadow guard and asked him about Tang Li's situation. "Your Highness, the Tang clan head says you don't have to worry. He'll definitely take over the arms trade within a year," the shadow guard reported. Long Fei grew angry. This prince has asked him 5 times, and he's given the same reply every time. What does he mean? There's a rumor going around that the Tang clan is going to supply the Ning clan's arms trade. What's going on? The shadow guard passed on Long Fei's words back to the Tang clan. A few days later, Long Fei received a 20-page letter that detailed Tang Li's entire honeymoon journey. It detailed how he'd coaxed Ning Jing to be happy, how he'd created romantic feelings to move her, how he'd created misunderstandings to make her jealous, and how he'd loosened the reins only to grasp them better. At the end of the letter, Tang Li added that if Long Fei couldn't handle Han Yunxi, he could ask him for advice at any time. He promised that he would be able to tame Han Yunxi within a year, and he would even be able to carry her in his arms. Long Fei's expression when he read the letter was simply unimaginable. At this time, Tang Li was lying on the tatami in Madame Tang's courtyard, rolling on the ground with laughter. "Huh? Mother, do you think my brother will rush down from Tianshan Mountain and kill me?" Madame Tang was overjoyed. No, he'll rush down the mountain and castrate you." Tang Li looked up with a hurt expression. "Are you really my mother? Will Ning Jing really come over later?" Madame Tang asked. "She'll definitely come over." Tang Li was very confident. The Ning clan still hasn't discovered that the Pearflower Storm Needles have been destroyed. Madame Tang had been puzzled by this matter. They probably don't know how to use it. "Huh? Let them slowly figure it out. Tang Li chuckled. Shoo! Madame Tang heard the secret signal from the maidservant and became alert. She's coming, quickly. Today, Tang Li and Madame Tang were going to play the trick of injuring themselves to gain Ning Jing's confidence. After Tang Li and Ning Jing returned to the Tang sect after their honeymoon, their lives returned to normal. After Tang, Li inherited the position of clan master. He began to take charge of the manufacturing and design of various levels of hidden weapons. Ning Jing remotely controlled the management of several major industries in her hands through letters, the largest of which was the arms trade. The two of them did their own things. When they were together, it was always Tang Li who started the fight, and in the end, it was Tang Li who made her happy in all kinds of ways. Several times, no matter how Tang Li coaxed Ning Jing, she didn't smile. Tang Li made an exception and took her to visit the Tang sect's secret hidden weapons manufacturing factory. In short, Tang Li was the epitome of a wife-slave. Almost everyone in the Tang sect said that Tang Li was the man who doted on his wife the most. Hearing this, Ning Jing didn't know what to think. Perhaps she really believed that Tang Li had fallen in love with her. A few days ago, she had pretended to be in a bad mood and refused to answer Tang Li's questions. In the end, Tang Li grew angry, so she told him that business at the arms trade had been terrible recently. Because they hadn't released any new weapons in a long time, their competitors had snatched up a few big orders. Tang Li considerately told her, Jing, what are you afraid of? I'm here. The Tang clan has a few types of hidden weapons that are perfect for the battlefield. I can just supply them to you for free. Once you spread the news, I guarantee you'll get back all your lost business. The next day after Tang Li's boastful words, Ning Jing really did spread the news, sending all of Cloud Realm continent into an uproar. After all, anyone who could use the Tang clan's hidden weapons as weapons would double the strength of their armies. Ning Chung was probably the happiest person to hear the news. That was because no matter how Ning Jing sold her weapons, they'd all end up in his hands. After Ning Jing spread the news, she immediately went to find Tang Li to ask him for details on the types and quantities of hidden weapons. But Tang Li only hemmed and hawed. Ning Jing immediately grew unhappy. If her previous unhappiness had all been an act to make things difficult for Tang Li, then she couldn't tell whether she was truly angry or faking it this time. This morning, she'd asked Tang Li again, but Tang Li had vowed to give her an answer by the afternoon. But by the time the sun was about to set, Tang Li was nowhere to be seen. Ning Jing couldn't find him anywhere and had no choice but to come to Lady Tang's courtyard. Lady Tang's place was the last place in the Tang clan she wanted to visit. Hearing the footsteps outside, Tang Li immediately tossed a rattan whip to Lady Tang. Mother, don't use too much force. It's fine. Tang Li had promised Ning Jing something so important, so he naturally had to use the trick of injuring himself to gain her confidence. Although Lady Tang agreed to play along with her son's act, she couldn't bring herself to do it with the whip in her hand. Son, why don't we just hit her a few times? Do you think Ning Jing's blind? Do you think she'll believe us if we don't hit her hard enough? Tang Li said seriously. Mother, if you can't steal your heart, then I won't be the clan head if I can't get her arms trade within a year. Then go find your father. Have him hit you. Lady Tang grew anxious. She'll only believe you if you hit her. As Tang Li spoke, he snatched the rattan whip and swiftly whipped himself a few times. Every time he whipped himself, his skin and flesh were lacerated. It was a ghastly sight. Actually, Tang Li was a martial artist, so these few whips didn't carry much force. At most, they were just superficial wounds, so he could bear it. After whipping his legs, he harshly whipped his back a few times, causing his body to bleed. Finally, he handed the rattan whip to Lady Tang. At this time, Lady Tang's eyes were already filled with tears, but Tang Li was still smiling. Mother, she's almost here. Hurry up, don't mess it up for me. I'll definitely take care of that little bitch. Lady Tang looked at her son's bruised body and saw the bright and excited smile on his face. Suddenly, a sense of uneasiness flashed through her heart. The radiance in her son's eyes at this moment was too similar to his father's when he was young. That was the kind of radiance that would only appear when you like someone. Lady Tang hoped that this was just her imagination. She gripped the rattan whip and quickly got into the mood. While crying, she reprimanded Tang Li, "You unfilial son. Wastrel, it's all my fault. It's all my fault for spoiling you too much. That's why you've become like this." Tang Li, oh Tang Li, do you know that the Tang sect's hidden weapons are not to be sold to outsiders? It's a rule passed down by our ancestors. It's the foundation of our Tang sect's seclusion. Do you know how much trouble the Tang sect will face in the future if you do something bad? I'm telling you, there's no way. There's no way this is happening. Ning Jing stood at the door with her arms crossed and silently listened. Her penetrating eyes were sizing up Tang Li's injuries. "Mother, I'll definitely do what I promised Ning Jing. Today, even if you beat me to death, I won't change my mind. I'm the Tang sect's leader, not father," Tang Li said angrily. As soon as he finished speaking, Lady Tang viciously lashed out with the whip. His skin really split open. "Unfilial son, you unfilial son, even if I beat you to death today, I won't allow you to break the rules of our ancestors." As Lady Tang spoke, she lashed out with the whip again. Who knew that Ning Jing would actually not move? Lady Tang's heart was bleeding, but she had no choice but to continue. Would Ning Jing stop her? Chapter 766. Mrs. Tang was waiting for Ning Jing to stop her. However, after she whipped Tang Li for the third time, Ning Jing was still standing there. Mrs. Tang glanced over and saw Ning Jing's amused expression. It was as if she was enjoying watching Tang Li get beaten up. How could she tolerate this? This woman's heart was simply made of stone. Tang Li's efforts over the past few days were all for naught. "Ning Jing, how dare you come here?" Mrs. Tang pretended that she had just noticed her. She suddenly rushed over and lashed out with the vine whip. Ning Jing almost didn't dodge. She was scared out of her wits. "It's all your fault, you bitch. You seduced my son first. The Tang sect gave you face and married you officially. What else do you want? You don't want to mess with the Tang sect, do you?" Mrs. Tang was both acting and serious. She lashed out with the whip again, but Ning Jing dodged it again. A crafty look flickered past her eyes. Instead of running outside, she ran into the room and hid by Tang Li's side. This Mrs. Tang and Tang Li both cursed in their hearts. Mrs. Tang turned back and had to continue acting. "Tang Li, get out of the way. I'll teach this little vixen a lesson today. Otherwise, she'll forget that the Tang sect's surname is Tang, not Ning." "No." Tang Li was very brave. "Are you going to move or not?" Mrs. Tang asked again. "No. Even if you beat me to death, I won't move," Tang Li said loudly. Ning Jing hid behind him and clutched his clothes tightly. "I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to move or not?" Mrs. Tang was waiting for her son to think of a way to get out of this situation. Tang Li couldn't compromise. He was waiting for Mrs. Tang to find a way out herself. In the end, after Mrs. Tang whipped Tang Li 3 times, she pretended to have a heart attack and threw away the vine whip. She supported herself with one hand on the table and the other on her chest. She was out of breath and couldn't speak. "Mother, mother, what's wrong? Someone come!" Tang Li shouted. The maidservants immediately rushed over. The maidservants in Lady Tang's courtyard were all clever people. They were used to seeing Lady Tang pretend to be ill, so they all looked flustered. They quickly carried Lady Tang to the inner room, but did not call for a doctor. "Jing, don't be afraid. You go back first. I want to see my mother," Tang Li said seriously. Unexpectedly, Ning Jing was not concerned about his injury or Mrs. Tang's illness. She asked, "What about the hidden weapons?" At this moment, Tang Li almost vomited blood. However, he still endured it. He didn't believe that his strategy of spoiling his wife wouldn't work. "It's fine, don't worry. I'll definitely do what I promised you," Tang Li answered seriously. Then I'm relieved." Ning Jing smiled happily. She was obviously doing it on purpose. When she left Madame Tang's courtyard, she smiled even more happily. Tang Li wanted to trick her with his little tricks? He must be dreaming. At night, when Tang Li returned to his room, Ning Jing was already lying on her side. She was sleeping with her back to the outside. Tang Li's wounds were not treated, and he looked like he had just returned from Madame Tang's place. He stuck his head out to look at Ning Jing and saw that she was really asleep. A self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. He clearly knew that it was all an act, and they were competing to see who would be conquered first. However, when he saw Ning Jing sleeping so soundly, his heart still felt cold. He didn't wake Ning Jing up. He took off his outer clothes and went to the backyard to wash up. A large basin of cold water poured down from the top of his head. The coldness penetrated his heart, causing the wounds all over his body to hurt. It also cleared up his somewhat groggy mind. "Tang Li, do you want to die?" Suddenly, Ning Jing's voice came from behind him. Tang Li looked back and saw Ning Jing standing on the steps in a thin nightgown. Her hair was casually scattered, and her dainty little face was a little drowsy. Even after she got married, she insisted on wearing men's clothes. Even he could only see her in women's clothes when they were in bed. If he ignored what she said just now, he could really think of her as a weak woman who could not stand the wind. She was delicate, and people could not help but want to protect her. However, this woman was not someone that ordinary men could protect. Tang Li quickly came back to his senses. He chuckled and said, "Did I wake you up?" "Yes," Ning Jing said angrily. "It's the middle of the night. If you want to wash up, can't you go somewhere else?" Tang Li's temper was unimaginably good. He still chuckled. "Hurry up and go back to sleep. Be careful not to catch a cold. I'll change to another place." He was really about to leave, but Ning Jing said angrily, "Come back. You woke me up, and I can't sleep." Tang Li obediently came back. "Then I'll talk to you." Ning Jing rolled her eyes at him. She took his hand and went into the house. She was not gentle at all. She was very violent. She pressed him into a chair and then took a towel to wipe his body. When she touched his wounds, she was still careful. She took out the best ointment she had hidden and carefully applied the ointment on Tang Li. Other than the pleasure in bed, this was the first time that Tang Li saw this woman's gentle side. Soon, the wounds on his upper body were treated. Tang Li looked at his wet pants and snickered maliciously. "Take it off. Hurry up." Ning Jing frowned and looked unhappy. She did not know if it was because she was woken up or because Tang Li's wounds had not been treated. Tang Li quickly took off his clothes and was only left with a pair of shorts. Ning Jing squatted down and applied the ointment on him. He did not know if it was just Tang Li's imagination. When Ning Jing squatted down, he seemed to have heard her sigh. "Ning Jing, is there anything in this world that can make you sigh with a heart of stone?" After treating the whip wounds on his legs, Ning Jing threw the ointment on the table and warned him coldly, "If you wake me up again, you'll have to bear the consequences." She curled up on the bed again, leaving Tang Li sitting alone at the side. He was only wearing a pair of shorts. Tang Li's cold heart seemed to have warmed up. He quickly lay down beside Ning Jing. At first, he was very careful, but later on, he became restless. He first leaned toward her and then wrapped his big hand around her waist. "Tang Li," Ning Jing warned in a low voice. Tang Li turned a deaf ear to her. His big hand moved restlessly as he murmured, "Jing Jing, Jing Jing." In the silent night, the familiar embrace and the murmur of a lover were no longer important. What was real, what was fake, who was acting, who was watching the show, and who was immersed in the show. The candlelight was extinguished and the gauze curtain fell. Their minds were in a mess. When their passion reached its peak, he heard Ning Jing's gentle voice, "Ali, your wounds." Tang Li covered her mouth. "If a virgin dies under a chrysanthemum, I'll still be a romantic ghost." He always remembered that the little chrysanthemum was her favorite flower. While Tang Li was immersed in his tenderness, Han Yunxi, who was far away in Pill Fiend Pharmacy, was worried about him before she left for Medical City. Even if he's tricking Ning Jing, news like this will still cause trouble for the Tang clan, Han Yunxi said seriously. Tang Li had agreed to cooperate with Ning Jing's arms trade to sell assassination weapons. This was a signal to outsiders that the Tang clan's rules weren't so strict. Young clan head Tang, "I'm more haste, less speed." Chu Shifeng was extremely worried as well. He secretly hoped that the Tang clan wouldn't fall into chaos before His Highness Duke of Qin made his move. Gu Beiwei wasn't familiar with such matters, so he didn't say much. He simply handed over a few prescriptions to Mu Ling and Imperial Physician Huang. These are my additions. You can refer to them for reference. After making arrangements for Pill Fiend Pharmacy, Gu Beiwei wrote down a few more prescriptions for preventing epidemics. He suggested that Mu Ling find someone to make the medicine and divide it into bags before having the various prefectures, towns, and villages distributed to each household. Han Yunxi couldn't help but admire Gu Beiwei's thoughtfulness. Given the lack of doctors in the south-central regions and the increasing number of patients, it was easy for a large-scale epidemic to break out. Little looked over the prescriptions as he asked Gu Beiwei a few questions. Gu Beiwei patiently explained everything while Lady Hellion sat on one side and watched. She seemed to be lost in thought for a moment. Seventh Madam, Little seems to have grown taller recently, Han Yunxi said with a grin. Lady Hellion didn't react at all. Mother, my big sister's asking you a question. I've grown taller, Little exclaimed. Only then did Lady Hellion snap out of her daze. Yes, you've grown taller. Seventh Madam, you must be tired. Go back and rest early. We'll have to trouble you and Little to come over and help us while we're away, Han Yunxi said. Lady Hellion glanced at her. You're treating me like an outsider. Han Yunxi finally had the time to chat with Lady Hellion and Little after she was done with her work. However, she had no choice but to leave before long. If she stayed any longer, the sun would have risen. Bailey Mingxiang had already left in secret. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei didn't return to the Duke of Qin's residence, but left Pill Fiend Pharmacy directly. As for Gu, not a trace of him was seen the entire night. Mu Ling, Imperial Physician Huang, and Lady Hellion sent them off. When the carriage was so far away that they couldn't see it anymore, Lady Hellion asked, "All right, where are they going?" "Why did I forget to ask?" "To save someone," Mu Ling answered. Imperial Physician Huang sneered inwardly, but didn't say anything. "Who are they saving?" Little asked curiously. Mu Ling rubbed Little Er's head. "Big sister doesn't know either. You can ask your big sister when she comes back." Okay. Little was obedient. The next morning, Mu Ling didn't show up at Pill Fiend Pharmacy. She had the shadow guard take her to Han Yunxi and the others. As expected, she saw Gu. "Alas, so you're coming with us?" Gu Qishao grinned heartlessly. He knew Mu Linger couldn't leave, but he didn't care. Mu Ling took out a bottle of medicine from her sleeve and handed it to him. "Here, I know you're going back to Medical City to settle accounts with those people. You have to be careful." Gu was shocked, then angrily turned to glare at Han Yunxi. As expected, Mu Ling already knew that he was Gu Qisha, the abandoned disciple of Medical City. Han Yunxi avoided Gu's gaze and urged her horse forward. "We'll wait for you up ahead." Gu Beiwei and the shadow guard immediately followed, leaving Gu and Mu Ling alone. Gu's anger towards Han Yunxi always came and went as quickly as it came, as if it had never been much. He wasn't in Pill Fiend Pharmacy often anyway, so it didn't matter if this last knew. He was already chuckling again and didn't ask Mu Ling about knowing his identity. He fiddled with the medicine bottle and asked, "Lass, what's this?" "It's a new medicine I developed. It's used when you need to save your life. Don't use it unless you have no other choice," Mu Ling said very seriously. "You mean I should only use it when I'm about to die?" Gu asked. "Don't jinx it." Mu Ling glared at him. Gu accepted it graciously. "I'll remember it. You can go back now." "Chi brother, you have to be careful." Mu Ling was reluctant to part with them. She knew that even if she made the medicine sound mysterious, Chi brother wouldn't open it. His medical skills were many times better than hers, and he had high standards. He wouldn't be interested in her medicine. In reality, the medicine bottle wasn't actually filled with medicine, but rather a note. Chi brother wouldn't read it, but he would at least keep it with him, as if she was accompanying him. "Chi brother, you should leave first. Ling will watch you leave." Mu Ling was a little choked up. They were always in such a hurry. When would they be able to see each other again? Would they be able to survive Medical City's calamity smoothly and safely? Chapter 767. Mu Ling said she wanted to see them leave first, but Gu immediately nodded. All right, then we're leaving. By the time Gu Qishao turned around, Mu Linger's heart had already shattered to pieces. She suddenly regretted her impulsive decision to chase after him. Why didn't she continue to pretend that she didn't know he was Gu Beiwei? Why didn't she pretend that she didn't know he was Medical City's abandoned disciple? Why didn't she pretend that she didn't know he would be leaving with Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei today? She could have even pretended to rush to the Duke of Qin's estate to look for him this morning. If she pretended not to know anything, she could even tell Gu Qisha, I like Qi Gij, I miss Qi Gij. As long as she could see Qi Gij, chat with him, and hear him call her lass, she would be satisfied for the rest of her life. But from today onwards, she couldn't say anything. In the end, she didn't shed any tears. Instead, she picked up her shattered heart and put it back together. A strong heart wasn't one that would never break. No matter how many times it was broken, it could always be put back together and resolutely welcome the next heartbreak. Qi Brother Ling, I will wait for you. It wasn't until the Shadow Guard came to urge her that Mu Ling reluctantly left. Mu Ling was only able to catch up to Han Yunxi because the Shadow Guard had led the way. As for the spies hidden in South Ning City, although they knew that Han Yunxi and the others were leaving, they couldn't follow their tracks. They had no idea where they were going or what they were going to do. Madame Helene first went to Pill Fiend Pharmacy early in the morning, then left with the excuse that she had matters to attend to in her estate. Halfway there, she turned into an alley. If we can't even find out something like this, when the Lord blames us, we'll all have to bear the consequences. The masked man's back was facing the light, but his back was tall and sturdy. Xinge, they're all smart people. How do you want me to ask? After Yunxi came back, she didn't ask about Su Xiaoyu or Gu Beiyue's poisoning. I feel like she already knows what's going on. Madame Helene said worriedly. If she knew what was going on, would you still be alive now? Do you think Han Yunxi is as kind and motherly as you? The man laughed disdainfully. Helene Zuexiang, if you take care of things properly, I won't make trouble for your son. You can continue to be the madam of the Han family, and he will still be the only heir of the Han family. The Han family is so big that it is enough for you and your son to live a carefree life. But if things go wrong... Before the man named Xing Ge could finish speaking, Mrs. Helene was shocked. What are you trying to do? You promised me that you wouldn't hurt her. Madame Helene really was a spy from Northern Li. When she married Han Kongan, the Lord didn't tell her what her mission was, only that she had to live well. Her surname wasn't Helene, but the Lord changed it for her to remind her not to forget where she came from. She naively thought that the Lord had let her off the hook by not giving her any missions. Once she married into the Han house, she knew her place and never fought. Over the past few years, the Lord had never contacted her. Until a few months ago, when Xing Ge suddenly came to find her and threatened her with Er's life. He wanted her to give him information on the Duke of Qin's estate and Pill Fiend Pharmacy. If Xing Ji's blade hadn't been in front of her face, she wouldn't have believed it. After all these years, she really believed that the Lord had forgotten about her. If possible, she didn't want to betray Han Yunxi either. If not for Han Yunxi, she and would have been in dire straits by now. But for Er's sake, she had no choice but to accept the Lord's orders. Helene Zuexiang, you're not young anymore. Why are you still so childish? Xing Ge smiled coldly. I'll let you go. But what about the Lord? Do you think you can escape from him? What does the Lord want? Madame Helene asked angrily. That's not a question for you or me to ask. Remember your duty. Also, find out where Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei went as soon as possible. Xing Ge turned to leave. Madame Helene hurriedly asked, Su Xiaoyu, is she still alive? Xing Ge was immediately displeased. You dare ask about her? Do you know that that stinky girl almost exposed your identity? You're the Lord's most hidden chess piece in the Han house. If I hadn't been smart that day, I wouldn't have been able to escape, let alone you. Madame Huyen's heart was filled with apprehension, but she didn't dare ask any questions. She watched as Xing Gu disappeared into the shadows of the alleyway. It had to be said that Madame Hellion really was the most hidden chess piece. If Su Xiaoyu hadn't run into her by chance, or if Long Fei hadn't sent people to keep an eye on Su Xiaoyu, no one would have suspected Madame Hellion at all. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwen knew the truth, but Han Yunxi was still in the dark. Before she left, she even told Chu Shifeng to investigate the matter in secret. If Long Fei Yi hadn't said anything, Han Yunxi would never have guessed that her seventh madam had betrayed her. Su Xiaoyu could be said to have made a contribution by accident, but her current situation wasn't good at all. She had been starving for 5 days and 5 nights. Forget about food, she hadn't even had a drink of water. The dark, gloomy cell resembled a dry well. Its walls were covered in moss and unknown vines. Su Xiaoyu lay listlessly on one side, chewing on a freshly planted vine. If it wasn't for these vines, she would have died long ago. She still didn't know who her kidnappers were, but they delivered food and water to her once every half a month. No matter how hungry she was, she didn't dare to eat it all at once. Instead, she kept eating slowly until she ran out, then used the vines to allay her hunger. She had already forgotten Chu Shifeng's training, but she still remembered some survival skills. Thus, she wouldn't die so easily. She curled up and let down her waist-length hair, draping it over her body to keep warm. She was going to sleep. Sleeping was the best way to conserve energy and delay the digestion of food. Unexpectedly, the cell door suddenly opened. She immediately grew alert. This wasn't the time to deliver food. As expected, the newcomer was a girl around 16 or 17 years old. She was dressed in clean, pink robes that stood out in the dark, filthy cell. Su Xiaoyu couldn't see her face clearly in the dim light, but she could see that the girl's large, luminous eyes were shining brightly. Su Xiaoyu couldn't help but blink. Her eyes had to be bigger and brighter than the girl's. Aya, you're not dead yet? The girl's tone was acerbic. I thought I'd come to collect a corpse today. Aya, should I be happy or unhappy? Unwilling to be outdone, Su Xiaoyu retorted, did your father or mother die? Or did you come all the way here to collect a corpse? As soon as these words were spoken, the already cold prison cell seemed to have become even colder. It was so cold that even the guards outside could not help but feel their hair stand on end. It wasn't a good thing to offend Miss Yu. Miss Yu was the master's most trusted disciple. Her methods were just as frightening. This Miss Yu wasn't referring to Su Xiaoyu, but the girl whose eyes were filled with fury at this very moment. Dead father? Dead mother? Miss Yu suddenly sneered. I'm so sorry. I've lost my father and mother since young, so I really don't need to collect a corpse. As she said that, she walked towards Su Xiaoyu. Su Xiaoyu could clearly feel a strong murderous aura closing in on her. She reckoned that this girl's martial arts skills were far above hers. What should she do? She curled up in a corner, not moving at all as she watched the girl walk towards her. Suddenly, Su Xiaoyu grabbed a handful of soil and threw it towards the girl. The girl dodged sideways and waved off some of the soil that had landed on her shoulder with interest. Su Xiaoyu had poisoned the soil, and she was secretly happy. Who knew that the girl looked at her with disdain? You dare to show off your slight skill in front of an expert. What a joke. Saying that, she squatted down and pressed one hand on Su Xiaoyu's right shoulder. Su Xiaoyu's right hand, which was about to poison, was unable to lift up. She quickly pressed on Su Xiaoyu's left shoulder. You know poison? Who are you? Su Xiaoyu asked angrily. She was shocked. She felt as if thousands of ants were gnawing on her shoulders. It was as if they were gnawing on her flesh and drilling into her bones. The soreness was indescribable. Who I am isn't important. What's important is who is Gu. The girl asked. I don't know. I'm not familiar with him. Su Xiaoyu replied loudly. Not saying? The girl laughed. I don't know. If I knew, I would definitely tell you. Su Xiaoyu was speaking the truth. She would not suffer for someone who was not important to her. If the poison in her shoulder was not cured, her hands would be crippled. All right, then I'll ask you again. Is there a phoenix birthmark on Han Yunxi's back? The girl asked again. Su Xiaoyu suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. However, she could not recall it. Is there? The girl's patience was not bad. I don't know. Su Xiaoyu replied loudly. Not to mention that she did not know. Even if she knew, she would definitely not say it. She would not reveal a single word about her master. The girl's smile became even more brilliant. That pair of bright eyes were in high spirits in the dusk. She said, All right, then tell me, what do you know? I don't know anything. I'm just a servant girl. Su Xiaoyu scolded. You're also a dog. You should be clear about the rules. Slap. The girl fiercely slapped her. Su Xiaoyu fell to the ground. Her shoulders hurt so much that she could not move her hands. She glared fiercely at the girl. Her gaze was fierce and sinister, causing the girl to shrink back. You're so young, but you're quite capable. I'll give you a month's time. If you don't die, we'll slowly play. After the girl finished speaking, she flicked her sleeves and left. Outside the secret prison, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the girl's young face. It also illuminated her pair of large eyes that had been sinister for a long time. She was none other than Bai Yanqing's disciple, Jun Yixie's little junior sister, Bai Yuqiao. It went without saying that Madame Hulyin's lord was Bai Yanqing. Miss you, the lord is urging you. The attendant reported in a low voice. I know. Bai Yuqiao instructed in a low-key manner. Keep an eye on that girl. She's Han Yunxi's servant girl. Keep her for future use. After she finished speaking, she rushed to see Bai Yuqiao. Bai Yuqiao was waiting for her in a carriage by the roadside. Master, that girl won't say anything. She reported truthfully. There's no rush. Bai Yanqing put down the chess record in his hand and asked, You girl, where do you think Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue went? Up to Tianshan? I heard that Gu Beiyue's medical skills are not bad. Could it be that he went up to Tianshan to treat Long Fei Ye's injuries? Bai Yuqiao asked. Chapter 768. This was probably the first time Bai Yanqing felt uncertain. He had many guesses, but he couldn't be sure of any of them. Han Yunxi shouldn't have gone to Celestial Mountain at this time, he muttered to himself. Nor should she have left South Ning. Why? Why? As he spoke, he glanced at Bai Yuqiao. You lass, what do you think? Why not go to Medicine City? Bai Yuqiao continued. Actually, anyone with half a brain could tell that Han Yunxi had to stabilize the south-central regions for Long Fei's sake and prevent internal strife. Medical City's blockade of South Ning was the root of the unrest. Although Bailey Yuanlong had complete control of the commander-in-chief's estate and claimed to fight Medical City to the end, Han Yunxi and the others weren't stupid enough to court death by going to Medical City. It would be useless even if they went. They could lead troops to attack Medical City, but that would only anger the entire medical industry and even Cloud Realm's various powers and commoners. At that time, Han Yunxi, a descendant of the poison sect, would be branded a scourge of the world. Master, if they join forces with Medicine City against Medical City, do they have a chance of winning? Bai Yuqiao asked. None. Bai Yanqing was certain. Medicine and medicine are one family to begin with. His Excellency Pill King might help her, but Medicine City won't give him any face on this matter. Just watch and see. The King of Medicine can help Han Yunxi now, but he can't help Han Yunxi forever. The King of Medicine's medicine hut couldn't help everyone because most of the patients were ordinary. They didn't need medicine from the hut, only medicine from Medicine City. Bai Yuqiao didn't understand. Master, then where will they go? Bai Yanqing glanced at her without a word. Bai Yuqiao felt that although her master was annoying, he wasn't as fierce as before. Thus, she waited for a while and asked timidly, Master, does Han Yunxi really have a phoenix birthmark? What's that? Her master had asked her to interrogate Su Xiaoyu. In fact, she herself did not know what it was. He didn't know if Bai Yanqing heard him, or if he didn't want to answer, or if he didn't hear him, but he didn't answer Bai Yuqiao. Bai Yuqiao knew his temper, so he didn't dare to continue asking. Until now, she still couldn't figure out her master's attitude towards Han Yunxi. Did he want her dead or alive? Thinking of this, Bai Yu Qiao could not help but think of his senior brother, Jun Yixie. A few days ago, they'd received news that senior brother and the two imperial princes had gotten into a huge conflict with the Winter Crow clan. The crown prince had been heavily injured, but Winter Crow's medical skills were far behind. Senior brother had escorted the crown prince back to treat his wounds, but the second imperial prince had refused to leave. He'd vowed to buy a horse no matter what, so he was still at Winter Crow. Bai Yu Qiao knew that this was senior brother's scheme. The crown prince would probably die on the road, while the second imperial prince would be in grave danger as well. She had no idea how senior brother was going to deal with the wrath of the Northern Dynasty's emperors, much less when he'd be able to buy a horse. Senior brother was working himself to the bone at Winter Crow, while master had done so much behind his back. "What are you spacing out for? Why aren't you leaving yet?" Bai Yanqing said coldly. Bai Yu Qiao obediently went to drive the carriage while she asked innocently, "Master, where are we going?" "Medical City," Bai Yanqing said coldly. Medical City's Apricot Woods Conference would be held in 10 days. That event represented the highest level of medical skills in Cloud Realm Continent. So, of course, he wanted to join in on the fun and broaden his horizons. Moreover, he was curious as to what other methods Gu Yintian had to deal with Han Yunxi besides sealing off the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. He'd been planning for years, and everything was already in place. With the three countries at war, the Long Fei Yi wanted to sit back and reap the benefits while Gu Yintian wanted to be the Oriole stalking the cicada, unaware of the mantis behind. He wanted to steal everything the Long Fei Yi had painstakingly built up. According to his original plan, as long as Jun Yixie's troops arrived and trained them for a month, the three countries would fall into a state of exhaustion. With all three sides injured and lacking in food and medicine, Northern Li's armored cavalry could head south and sweep through the three countries until they reached the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate. Of course, he knew that the Long Fei Yi had an ace navy in his hands that could threaten Northern Li's eastern borders from the Eastern Sea. But he wouldn't give the Long Fei Yi the chance to do so. He had a huge secret in his hands that was enough to destroy the Long Fei Yi at a critical moment and cause all of his subordinates to fall apart. Over the past few days, Gu Yintian had been doing two things: waiting and keeping an eye on the situation on Celestial Mountain. But he never expected such a turn of events. Han Yunxi's identity as the poison sex orphan had been exposed, nor did he expect Ning Cheng to find so many red-robed generals to end the war ahead of time. Even less did he expect the Long Fei Yi to control the Lustbite energy. His plans had been thoroughly ruined, but fortunately, the situation wasn't terrible at all. In fact, it was even more advantageous for him and Northern Li than before. Now he only needed to do two things. One was to continue waiting until Medical City sealed off the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate and Ning Cheng led his troops south. The other was to force Han Yunxi into a dead end. The closer a person was to a dead end, the more hatred they would have in their heart. He had instigated the people of Liberty City not to kill Han Yunxi, but to arouse the hatred in her heart. Unfortunately, Gu had shown up before the people of Liberty City could do anything. Thinking about this, Bai Yanqing slowly narrowed his eyes that were as sharp as an eagle's. Who is Gu? Bai Yanqing was on his way to Medical City, and Han Yunxi and the others were also on their way to Medical City. It was unknown whether they would run into each other in Medical City. Han Yunxi and the others rode on horses. After 3 days and 3 nights in the deep mountains and forests, they finally saw a town. Esteemed Wang Fei, there'll be more people down the mountain. For safety's sake, let's disguise ourselves, Gu Beiwei said. Actually, they could have openly gone to Medical City, but Gu Beiwei was low-key and cautious. He didn't want anyone to know his whereabouts in case new problems cropped up. Gu Beiwei and Long Fei Yi both preferred to keep their facial disfigurements quiet. Once they made a move, it would be a fatal blow to guarantee victory. The results were the same, but the process was different. Long Fei Yi's process was cruel and ruthless, while Gu Beiwei's was gentle and gentle. Chu Shifeng had already prepared a large carriage on the side. Han Yunxi was going to disguise herself as a sickly woman to seek medical treatment from Medical City. Han Yunxi was about to get on the carriage when Gu stopped her. He rubbed his chin and studied Gu Beiyue. "Doctor, as this young master sees it, you should be the patient. You don't need to pretend to be one to look like one." Gu Beiyue laughed at himself, while Han Yunxi's face darkened. She elbowed Gu hard in the chest. I'm hurt." Gu clutched his chest exaggeratedly as he pressed Han Yunxi's shoulders. If she didn't help him up, he'd topple over. "Poison lass, don't pretend anymore. I'll do it. You'll be my wife and stay by my side, serving me at all times. Gu Beiyue's still a doctor. If he can't cure me, he'll come with us to Medical City to seek treatment." Gu Beiyue was still smiling. Before Han Yunxi could speak, Chu Shifeng slapped Gu's hand away. "Gu, if you keep being rude, don't blame us for being rude." Gu Qixiao replied with 2 words. "Boring." "Xiao Qi." Han Yunxi suddenly smiled, her voice very gentle. Gu had a bad premonition. He grew serious and said, "Do as you've done before. Don't waste time. Hurry on the road is more important." Before, Han Yunxi would be the patient, Gu Beiyue her older brother, and Gu her retainer. "Xiao Qi, you're so pretty that you'll attract too much attention as a retainer. I think you're more suited. I'm suited to be your older brother, right?" Gu smiled beautifully. "Poison lass, you're as pretty as me." Han Yunxi was indeed very beautiful, especially when she smiled. That kind of temperament was something she was born with, something that couldn't be nurtured no matter how much effort was put into nurturing it. No matter how good her makeup was, it couldn't bring out her aura. Her smile was even prettier than Gu's. "No, you're suited to be a shadow guard. Don't show your face." Gu Beiyue laughed out loud, while Chu Shifeng didn't know what to say. Could he tell esteemed Wang Fei that the shadow guard squad didn't want Gu? At this moment, Su Donglin popped out from the side. "Gu, you don't have to travel with us." Although Su Donglin's life had been saved by Gu, he was resolutely loyal to His Highness Duke of Qin and would never betray him. What did loyalty mean? It meant protecting His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei with his life. Their love was stronger than gold. Gu narrowed his eyes at Su Donglin, but before he could speak, Su Donglin said, "Don't say anything. If you want my life, I'll give it back to you." It was rare for Gu to be the target of everyone's attacks. He was about to strike back when the messenger eagle arrived. Everyone immediately grew serious. The envelope was very special, unlike the usual all-white and all-blue envelopes. It seemed to have been custom-made in a light purple color with plum branches and fallen flowers drawn on it. Han Yunxi held it in her hands and recognized Long Fei Ye's signature at a glance. Both surprised and delighted, she quickly opened the envelope and saw that even the paper was a faint purple with plum blossoms flying about. Gu Beiyue and Gu had a rare moment of tacit understanding as they both stared at the letter in silence. Gu Beiyue had always been a quiet man, but only Long Fei Yi could make Gu quiet down in front of Han Yunxi. "Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness wrote to you in a special envelope." Chu Shifeng broke the silence on purpose. Han Yunxi didn't notice his words, because her thoughts were all on the letter. She stared at it for a while before looking up at the crowd in confusion. "Why is it empty?" "That's right." Long Fei Ye's reply was empty. What did he mean? She'd written to say she missed him and called him an idiot, but he'd written an empty letter back? What did he want to tell her? Han Yunxi really didn't understand, but the crowd was too embarrassed to give her an answer. This was a little game between husband and wife, Long Fei Ye's way of teasing his wife. What right did outsiders have to explain? Even Gu Qixiao fell silent. Han Yunxi quickly sensed that something was wrong, and her face flushed red. She blurted it out because she was too curious. For a moment, she didn't even think that Long Fei Yi was playing tricks on her. I'll go change my clothes." She hid the letter in her sleeve and awkwardly ducked into the carriage. Once inside, she wasn't in the mood to change, but took out the letter and carefully examined it. Chapter 769. Han Yunxi hid in the carriage and checked Long Fei Ye's blank letter over and over again. She didn't even miss the inside of the envelope, but there was nothing but blankness. She couldn't find any ink. What does he mean? This should be Long Fei Ye's first time writing her a letter. Or rather, it should be a reply, but it turned out to be an empty letter. Is it because he's not good at expressing himself, so he decided not to express himself? If that's the case, then Han Yunxi was truly disappointed. Perhaps Han Yunxi was overthinking things, but she had a bad premonition. It didn't seem like Long Fei's style to reply to a letter. According to his style, even if he wasn't good at expressing himself, he'd still reply with, "I've received the letter." Or maybe I'm just overthinking things. Maybe he wants to give me a surprise, and this is only the first step. Han Yunxi comforted herself. At a time like this, Han Yunxi felt ashamed of herself for having such romantic thoughts. She wrote 2 more letters to Long Fei Yi, one to tell him about their journey and how his internal injuries were recovering. The other was the same. "Long Fei Yi, I miss you." Everyone put on a disguise, but Gu Qixiao refused to be a shadow guard, no matter what. In the end, he accepted the original arrangement. Han Yunxi disguised herself as a sickly young miss from a rich family. Gu Beiwei stuck a full beard on his handsome face to act as Han Yunxi's older brother. Gu used a human skin mask to disguise himself as a bodyguard and driver. Chu Shifeng and Su Donglin naturally followed them in the shadows with a group of shadow guard. They climbed over the mountains and ate a hot meal in the city before continuing on their journey without stopping. That night, while everyone was sleeping outdoors, Gu Beiwei received a secret letter from Long Fei Yi. It contained a set of medicinal pills, the Phoenix Breath pill he'd given to Kenzo. Although these medicinal pills couldn't heal Gu Beiwei completely, they could restore 20 to 30% of his internal energy in a short period of time. As for whether it was 20 or 30%, that would depend on Gu Beiwei's own efforts. The letter was very short. It explained the effects of the medicinal pills and the things to take note of during cultivation, but didn't contain anything else. Long Fei Yi didn't even explain where he'd gotten the pills or why he'd given them to him. Gu Beiwei stared at the short letter for a long time, unable to recover his senses. Who knew what he was thinking? What an exciting thing it was! When he'd found out that he'd lost all his internal energy and couldn't recover, he'd almost lost all hope. One had to know that even though he was unperturbed, he had spent countless nights sitting in boredom before he could finally accept this fact. Now, there was hope in the midst of despair. He trained hard since he was young. The shadow art that carried the last memories his grandfather and parents had left for him. The shadow art that carried the heavy responsibility of protecting the Western Qin royal family. The shadow art that carried the burden of protecting the woman he'd hidden deep in his heart was finally coming back. He was about to have a chance to truly stand up again. But there wasn't a trace of excitement or joy in his eyes. Instead, they were frozen and full of heaviness. It was a pity that Han Yunxi couldn't see Gu Beiwei at this moment. Otherwise, she'd definitely feel that the heaviness in Gu Beiwei's eyes was very similar to the heaviness she'd seen in Long Fei Yi's eyes many times. What was this heaviness for? When Long Fei Yi sent a secret letter to Gu Beiwei, he'd casually destroyed it after he'd read it. But this letter, he carefully folded it back into the envelope and hid it in his sleeve. As for the medicinal pills, he didn't hesitate to take them. Gu Beiwei thought that trust should be the same as the feeling of liking someone. It was duty-bound to be duty-bound to be duty-bound. All was quiet. Han Yunxi slept alone in the carriage. Gu Beiwei was dozing off outside the carriage. The shadow guards were all around, taking turns to keep watch. Gu Beiwei only had to be wary of Gu. However, Gu was the best to be wary of. He was very smart, but his focus was all on Han Yunxi. It had nothing to do with Han Yunxi. Even if he noticed something strange, he was too lazy to investigate. After taking the Phoenix Perch pill, Gu Beiwei began to cultivate bitterly every night. After a few days of rushing about, he was already halfway through the journey. The day of the Apricot Woods Conference was getting closer and closer. Of course, the situation in Cloud Realm Continent had changed as well. Medicine City finally gave in to Medical City's pressure and announced that they were temporarily suspending all dealings with Pill Fiend Pharmacy and the South Central Region's commander-in-chief's estate. Only after Han Yunshi's identity was confirmed would they reconsider their cooperation. It was true that the Wang clan, who controlled Medicine City, was loyal to Long Fei. But when they couldn't even protect themselves, there was no need to talk about loyalty. Fortunately, Wang Gong was still a humane man. A few days before the announcement, he allowed Pilfine Pharmacy to make a few large purchases and send out the goods in a timely manner. If I knew this would happen, I would have taken the chance to remove all restrictions on the Mu clan. Gu wasn't satisfied. For the sake of taking over Medicine City, he and Mu Ling had both gone to jail. Lady Lianxin had asked them to spare the Mu clan for the sake of giving birth to a child. Long Fei had seized the chance to have the Wang clan lift some restrictions on the Mu clan and leave a way out for Medical City. He hoped that Mu Ling could one day restore the Mu clan to its former glory. After all, Long Fei's ultimate goal wasn't to let the Wang clan dominate Medicine City. It could only be said that Mu Ling was too busy to be in two places, while Han Yunshi's identity as the poison sect had been exposed too early. There's still 7 to 8 days. As long as there's no large-scale epidemic, we should have enough medicine in stock, Gu Beiwei said. The King of Medicine has already replied. He's still willing to help us, Han Yunshi said seriously. Esteemed Wang Fei, Wang Gong can only help us in an emergency. He can't solve the root of the problem. You mustn't agree to anything. Gu Beiwei's expression was serious. If we don't have enough medicine, we can use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Medicine Ghost Valley should have a lot of high-grade ingredients. We can use this opportunity to put on airs in front of Medicine City and Medical City and by the hearts of the common people. They didn't use high-grade ingredients in large quantities, but rather common ones. However, high-grade ingredients could still treat some minor ailments with immediate results. The key was whether or not Gu was willing to spend the money. Gu smiled flirtatiously. As long as Poison Lass needs it, forget about Medicine Ghost Valley. Even if you want my life, I'd be happy to give it to you. They were clearly discussing a very serious issue, but Gu Beiwei and Gu made it sound so casual. Han Yunshi didn't know how difficult her situation would be without these two. Han Yunshi was relieved about the problem of medicine, but she also didn't have to worry about the issue of medicine. Over the past few days, she had been receiving letters from Mu Ling saying that a dozen or so doctors would travel thousands of miles to Pilfine Pharmacy every day. They would listen to Imperial Physician Huang's arrangements and be sent to the 3 central prefectures and several cities in Jiangnan to practice medicine. This was the biggest surprise that Gu Beiwei had given Han Yunshi. She never thought that this shut-in, who usually didn't socialize, would have such good connections. He was able to find so many colleagues who were willing to help him regardless of the cost. Of course, Medical City had long since announced that all doctors who stayed in the Commander-in-Chief's manor were disqualified from practicing medicine. Medicine City had also issued a ban, forbidding any medicine shops from selling the ingredients prescribed by these doctors. It could be said that the medical system of the Commander-in-Chief's manor had completely broken away from Medical City and Medicine City, and was self-sufficient. In the long run, this path would lead to a dead end, but it was extremely effective in the short term. The originally restless civil unrest had mostly been fanned out by people with ulterior motives. Thanks to the timely replenishment of resources from the medicine shops, the public's resentment gradually subsided. After all, most people only cared about what was in front of them. No patient would refuse treatment or protest against the Commander-in-Chief's manor for the sake of Medical City's righteousness and the poison sect's scourge on the world. It's time to step out, Han Yunshi said seriously. The Commander-in-Chief's manor had long publicly acknowledged that they would fight Medical City to the end, but as the person involved, she hadn't officially admitted anything. She thought that if she took advantage of the good situation in the South to step out and publicly denounce Medical City's inhumanity and accuse them of slandering the poison sect, it would definitely boost the Commander-in-Chief's manor's morale and garner the support of the commoners. I'll step out with you. Gu had been waiting for Han Yunshi to say this for a long time. Gu Beiwei looked at the two of them like an older brother and wanted to laugh. No rush, it's not time yet. We have to be on guard against the old fox behind the spies. Gu Beiwe was the most cautious of them all. He would either not make a move, or he'd make sure nothing went wrong. Right now, the most important thing was whether they could smoothly reach Medical City and participate in the Apricot Woods Conference. Han Yunxi and Gu nodded at the same time. Along the way, Han Yunxi had grown to trust and admire Gu Beiwe. Gu, on the other hand, had found Gu Beiwe much more pleasing to the eye than before. Besides them, no one else in the world could guess that they were on their way to Medical City, much less that they were planning to do something earth-shattering. Everyone was waiting to see a good show at the Commander-in-Chief's estate. Many people were even betting that the Commander-in-Chief's estate could hold out for a few months. In the Western military barracks, Ning Chung had just defeated Chu Shifeng and was in a good mood. His figure was tall and straight to begin with, but now he was dressed in silver-white battle robes that made him seem as lofty and untouchable as a mountain. Your lordship will definitely make Chu Shifeng surrender in 10 days at most. He laughed heartily, but his voice was still lofty and unapproachable. In other words, our army can march south after 10 days, the deputy general rejoiced. I heard that Dr. Gu Beiwe from the Commander-in-Chief's estate has quite the skills. He helped Han Yunxi recruit quite a few doctors, Ning Qing said. Isn't that so? Judging from the situation there, they should be able to hold out for at least half a year. The deputy general couldn't help but admire him. If not for those redcoat cannons, we probably wouldn't have been able to finish the war within that time. Ning Chung rejoiced inwardly. If he hadn't been decisive enough, he wouldn't have been able to seize the opportunity to attack the south-central regions. But the war wasn't his true goal. His true goal was Han Yunxi. He wasn't willing to be Medical City's running dog and capture Han Yunxi for them, but needed an excuse to force the Commander-in-Chief's estate to hand over Han Yunxi. Only by obtaining Han Yunxi would he have a chance to ask Chu Qingge about the Shadow Clan's whereabouts. Chapter 770. 10 days. Chu Tianyin had already retreated to the last city. Ning Chung would need 10 days at most to take it. If Chu Tianyin failed to defend the city, Emperor Kongcheng would definitely call for a halt and surrender. After all, they wouldn't be far from the capital's stronghold. Looking at the map on the table, the usually calm and composed Ning Chung couldn't help but feel a little restless. After a moment of thought, he coldly ordered, "Pass on the order to attack the city." The deputy general was shocked. He'd thought the Ning King had summoned him to discuss how to win the last battle beautifully. Who would have thought the king would suddenly give the order to attack the city? "Your Highness, are we attacking the city tonight?" the deputy general asked tentatively. "Yes," Ning Chung replied without hesitation. The deputy general had never disobeyed the king's orders before, let alone a military one. But this time, he was ready to throw caution to the wind. "Your Highness, please forgive this general for speaking out of turn, but tonight isn't the best time to attack. After all, the last battle had lasted more than 10 days and had just ended the day before yesterday. Their brothers hadn't even had time to catch their breaths yet, and the casualties were still being counted. A portion of the army's supplies had yet to be replenished. Although they'd won several battles in a row and needed to take advantage of their good morale, they still needed to rest for 2 or 3 days. Your Highness, although such a rash move might catch the enemy off guard, our army might not necessarily gain the upper hand, the deputy general advised. Ning Chung didn't need too much analysis or reminders. He knew better than the deputy general when the best time to attack was. At this moment, his eyes were lowered. His gaze seemed to be on the map, but it also seemed to be wandering. No one knew what he was thinking. The deputy general didn't dare persuade him any further when he saw that he hadn't spoken for a long time. After a long while, Ning Chung silently waved his hand and dismissed him. Ning Chung appeared to be silent, but his heart was in turmoil. Even he was shocked by his own decision. He had been on the battlefield for a long time and was always good at strategizing. Just now, he had lost his mind and made such a decision. If it wasn't for the deputy general's bold persuasion, the consequences would have been unimaginable once this order was passed down. Was he in such a hurry to end the war on the Western Front and attack the Southern Front? Why? He walked around the huge map and tapped his knuckles on the table. Finally, he sat back down. He thought that he must have been too anxious to compete with Long Fei Yi and was too anxious to find out the whereabouts of the Shadow Clan. After drinking a few glasses of wine in silence, he asked in a deep voice, "How's it going?" Only his personal attendant knew what he meant. The attendant replied, "We're still looking, but what?" His impatient tone betrayed his calm appearance. "It's just that thing is really hard to find." The attendant looked troubled. The group of people he sent out to look for a golden needle had searched everywhere Han Yunxi had gone to, and the people she had treated, but they couldn't find any clues. In the vast sea of people, it wasn't easy to find a single person, let alone a needle. "If it's easy to find, why would this prince need you?" Ningqing asked unhappily. The attendant was helpless and retorted, "Master, if you want Han Yunxi's golden needle, why don't you just ask her for it after you capture Han Yunxi? You might not find it even if you spend so much effort." When he said this, Ningqing slowly turned his head to look at him. When the attendant saw his gaze, a chill ran down his spine, and he felt goosebumps all over his body. He didn't dare to look any longer. He tactfully lowered his head and silently retreated. In the large tent, only Ning Cheng was left. He held a wine cup, his thin lips gently caressing the rim of the cup, deep in thought. Ning Cheng was anxious to lead the troops south, while Chu Tianyin was tense. He had already received Gu Beiyue's orders. No matter what, he had to contain Ning Cheng until the end of the month. While Chu Tianyin was shocked by Han Yunxi's identity, he couldn't figure out what Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue wanted to do. He was under Long Fei Ye's control and could only listen to his orders. However, if Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue ruthlessly took revenge on Ning Cheng for him, he would be very happy. In contrast to Ning Cheng and Chu Tianyin's excitement and worry, Long Tianma was much more relaxed after surrendering. It wasn't that he was useless, but that his troops were pretty much exhausted. The Mu family troops were worthy of his pride to have been able to hold out for an entire month against Ning Cheng's red barbarian cannons. He had lost 4 major cities to Ning Cheng, so he could be considered to have truly occupied a corner of the east. "General Mu, when do you think the Duke of Qin will descend Celestial Mountain?" Long Tianma asked. Right now, many people were discussing Long Fei Ye's attitude. After the matter of the poison sect was exposed, Long Fei Ye's actions on Celestial Mountain were all rumors. He still hadn't publicly expressed his stance on Han Yunxi's identity as a poison sect survivor. Moreover, no one knew why he was still on Celestial Mountain. There's no reason for him to stay on Celestial Mountain, right? General Mu stroked his chin, uncertain. Anyone who hadn't seen General Mu for a long time would definitely notice that General Mu had changed. He'd lost the resoluteness and bravery of a soldier, but gained the shrewdness and astuteness of a civil official. However, Long Tianma didn't think so. He had always understood General Mu's neutral stance in Tianying's court, especially after the General Mu married Mu Liyue to him. He was even more certain that General Mu wasn't just a talented general. In comparison, Mu Qingwu seemed much purer. Of course, Long Tianma kept these thoughts hidden deep in his heart. He'd never revealed them to anyone. But I still haven't heard of him descending the mountain, nor have I seen any major movements from the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, Long Tianma asked next. General Mu laughed. Your Majesty, Han Yunxi is a descendant of the poison sect. Have you never thought that the Duke of Qin would abandon her as a chess piece? Before Long Tianma could reply, Mu Qingwu hastily interjected. He won't. His Highness Duke of Qin wouldn't do that. In his eyes, Qin Wangfei isn't just a chess piece. General Mu glared at him unhappily. What are you so agitated about? I'm speaking the truth, Mu Qingwu muttered. Jin also believes that the Duke of Qin wouldn't be so heartless. Moreover, he's not the type to show weakness to Medical City, Long Tianma laughed. Your Majesty, whether it's Medical City or the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, we can't afford to offend them with our current strength. You mustn't support Medical City in this matter, nor can you defend Han Yunxi, General Mu reminded him seriously, sticking to his neutral stance to the very end. It was obvious that Long Tianma and Mu Qingwu didn't like this stance. Rather than calling it neutral, it was more accurate to say that they swayed with the wind. Long Tianma was about to retort, but General Mu didn't give him the chance and changed the topic. Your Majesty, there's been a lot of discussion in court recently about the issue of heirs. You're not young anymore. When Emperor Xian was your age, he already had 3 princes. Long Tianma had made Mu Luiyue empress, and in the past 2 years, the Empress Dowager had helped him choose a few more concubines. Unfortunately, he was cold and indifferent to all of them, so there hadn't been any good news from the palace ever since. There were many rumors in and out of the palace that Long Tianma had some sort of homosexual fetish. Jin understands. Every time General Mu urged him on, Long Tianma would say the same thing. He knew that General Mu wasn't just urging him to produce more offspring for the imperial family, but hinting that he shouldn't bully Mu Luiyue too much. General Mu's reminders, or perhaps warnings, always stopped before going too far. It's good that your Majesty understands. So speaking, he bid farewell, but didn't leave the palace to see Mu Luiyue. Instead, he went to see the Empress Dowager. Long Tianma had followed him a few times out of curiosity, but found that General Mu's visit with the Empress Dowager wasn't anything serious. He was just looking for her to play chess. The 3 countries of Cloud Realm continent all had their own agendas, but far away in the north, the Northern Dynasty's emperors had no time to worry about such things. That was because Northern Li's crown prince was dead. Northern Li's crown prince had been heavily injured in the conflict with the Winter Crow clan. Under the escort of Jun Yixie, he had rushed back to the country, but died before he could reach the capital. The entire Northern Li imperial capital was shrouded in thick, impenetrable black clouds. A violent storm, lightning, and thunder could descend at any moment. In the imperial study, the Northern Dynasty's emperors smashed his favorite white porcelain incense burner to pieces, landing squarely on Jun Yixie's head before shattering to pieces on the ground. Jun Yixie had already knelt in front of him for 3 days and 3 nights. His body was covered in wounds, but the most obvious one was the one on his head. He'd lost quite a bit of blood, but now the blood had congealed around the wound, obscured by his hair. Because of this wound, his naturally cold and evil face gained a hint of wildness. The Northern Dynasty's emperors had done everything he could to scold and vent. Only the 2 of them were left in the large imperial study, 1 sovereign and 1 subject, 1 sitting and 1 kneeling. After a day of silence, the Northern Dynasty's emperors seemed to grow tired. In a hoarse voice, he asked, "Where's your master?" Aken doesn't know. Master's whereabouts have always been a mystery. Imperial father knows as well, Jun Yixie replied honestly. He really didn't know where his master had gone. He assumed that his master would be waiting for him in the palace, but all that awaited him was the Northern Dynasty's emperor's curses and beatings for 3 days and 3 nights. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't disappointed. If his master was here, at least the Northern Dynasty's emperors wouldn't have lost all reason. He and his master had concocted this plan together. He always assumed that his master would arrange everything for him, but he never expected to face it alone. However, he'd be lying if he said he was too disappointed. Jun Yixie knew that his master must have something he had to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left him alone to deal with the Northern Dynasty's emperors. The crown prince had obviously died in his hands. No matter how stupid the Northern Dynasty's emperors were, they would still suspect something. It wouldn't be easy for him to survive this disaster. Even you don't know? Huh? The Northern Dynasty's emperors sneered. Jun Yixie didn't answer. He was thinking about how to convince the Northern Dynasty's emperors to trust him in the absence of his master. According to his plan, the second prince would soon die under the blades of the Winter Crow tribe. If the Northern Dynasty's emperors didn't trust him, he wouldn't be able to go to the Winter Crow tribe to collect the corpse. Then it would be difficult to buy a horse. The Northern Dynasty's emperors finally walked out of the imperial study. Unfortunately, he didn't tell Jun Yixie to rise, so Jun Yixie could only continue to kneel. Cloud Realm continent was filled with all sorts of factions. Long Fei Yi stood high on Celestial Mountain, overlooking all the commotion. Today, he just finished playing a game of chess with old Kinzo when a servant came to report that Bailey Mingxiang had arrived. Chapter 771. Upon hearing that Bailey Mingxiang had arrived at Celestial Mountain, Long Fei Yi was still tidying up his chess pieces. They should have reached Medical City by now. Naturally, he was asking about Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue's group. The Apricot Woods Conference is in 3 days. If they're not in Medical City by then, it'll be troublesome, Kinzo said with a smile. As expected, the Shadow Guards soon delivered Gu Beiyue's letter, saying they were safe. Your lordship is looking forward to it. Long Fei Ye's face had been taut these days, so it was rare to see him smile today. Kinzo stroked his beard, his heart filled with excitement. The Apricot Woods Conference was about to rewrite Cloud Realm's history. After confirming that Han Yunxi's group had arrived safely at Medical City, Long Fei Ye's heart finally relaxed. Next, he would enter the final stage of recovering his internal energy. This was a crucial stage where even the slightest mistake could mean a life or death situation. Even the Honored Elders would be powerless to save him. Thus, he and the Honored Elders decided not to hold the conference here, but to go to the Honored Elders' cave instead. Master, are you going? Long Fei Yi asked. Where's Bailey Mingxiang? Shouldn't you at least go down and bring her up yourself? Kinzo suggested. Just send someone down the mountain to bring her up. Have her stay in a side room for the next few days, Long Fei Yi said. Kinzo was puzzled. Are you sure? Is there a problem? Long Fei Yi retorted. Fei, if you don't put on a show, how are you going to bait the fish? Kinzo made things clear. Bailey Mingxiang was Long Fei Yi's bait this time. One of his goals was to lure out that old fox. Since He Ilian knew how to use delaying tactics to deal with him, it proved that He Ilian and the old fox behind the 9 Mystical Palace were very clear about the Lustbite energy. It was even possible that they already knew his identity as the East Qin Crown Prince. There were 3 stages to cultivating the Lustbite power. The first was to accept the Lustbite seal and use the seal to cultivate the Lustbite power. The second was to control the Lustbite power and use it freely. The third was to combine the Lustbite power and the original internal energy to reach an invincible state. At that time, even the venerables of Tianshan Mountain would not be able to do anything to him, let alone the ordinary people at the foot of the mountain. As long as Long Fei Yi healed his internal injuries, he would be considered to have completed the second stage of cultivation and fully control the Lustbite power. However, if he wanted to cultivate to the third stage and combine the Lustbite power with the original internal strength in his body to reach the invincible realm, he had to rely on the assistance of a martial arts genius to achieve it through dual cultivation. Even if he had the ability to reach the heavens, it was impossible for him to complete the third stage alone. In other words, if he couldn't find this martial arts genius, then the genius might be under someone else's control. His Lustbite power would forever be stuck at the second stage. Bailey Mingxiang. Of course, it wasn't a martial arts genius. Long Fei Yi only wanted to use Bailey Mingxiang to create a false impression and mislead that old fox. As long as that old fox suspected Bailey Mingxiang, he would definitely make his move again. Long Fei Yi knitted his brows at Kinzo. What's the play? For better or worse, we have to let people see that you value that girl. Kinzo suddenly thought of a plan and whispered in Long Fei Yi's ear in pleasant surprise. Fei, the Lustbite power hates emotions the most. Why don't we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? You can pretend to accept Miss Bailey and avoid trouble with that last Yunxi while fooling that old fox. The Lustbite power hated emotions the most. So if Han Yunxi knew martial arts, then if Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi clashed swords one day, Long Fei Yi's Lustbite power would disappear completely. If Long Fei Yi cultivated to the third stage of the Lustbite power and combined it with his internal energy, then once Han Yunxi clashed swords with him, Long Fei Yi would not only lose his Lustbite power, but all of his internal energy as well. There was only one reason for this. He had her in his heart. This was his greatest and most fatal weakness. If the old fox understood the lust bite power and wanted to deal with Long Fei Yi, he would definitely target Han Yunxi instead. Thus, Kinzo's suggestion wasn't a bad idea. Since Bailey Mingxiang was already on Celestial Mountain, why not let her temporarily take Han Yunxi's place and bear the brunt of Han Yunxi's danger? Long Fei Yi didn't react at all. Kinzo hastened to add, "Fei, if Miss Bailey is both your sweetheart and someone who can dual cultivate with you, then that old fox will definitely make his move soon." Finally, Long Fei Yi gave him a sidelong glance and said, "I can't do it. Fei, your identity will be revealed to the world one day. You can't hide it from that last Yunxi for the rest of your life. Explain it to her then, and she'll understand," Kinzo coaxed. "I can't do it." Long Fei Yi dragged out his words. Kinzo wanted to continue, but Long Fei Yi cut him off. "Master, have you gone senile with age?" "You." Kinzo was infuriated. "This brat is getting ruder and ruder. Do you think the old fox will believe such a preposterous act?" Long Fei Yi said, "Find someone to bring Bailey Mingxiang here. She can stay here in the name of acupuncture treatment. There's no need to be so high-profile about anything else." The more deliberate they were, the more suspicious they'd be. If they wanted to catch that old fox, they had to take things slowly. Carefree City had to be the old fox's handiwork to surround and kill Han Yunxi. Fortunately, they had Gu's help. Now that Gu was by Han Yunxi's side, he could at least guarantee Han Yunxi's safety. He'd rather owe Gu a favor than make things difficult for himself by playing such a senseless act. When he thought of how Han Yunxi would misunderstand him, he felt a trace of fear in his heart. Kinzo nodded thoughtfully. "Fei, you're a wolf hiding the heart of a fox." Kinzo was a martial arts practitioner who relied on his own strength to become the sect head of Kinzo. Although he was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't compare to Long Fei Yi when it came to scheming. Kinzo immediately sent someone to fetch Bailey Mingxiang from the foot of the mountain. Master and disciple left the room through a secret passage as they chatted. "Fei, tell Master the truth. East Qin's affairs. Why are you hiding it from the last Yunxi?" Kinzo asked in a low voice. This was probably the first time anyone had asked him such a question so directly. Tang Zijin, Aunt Ru, and even Lady Tang and Tang Li were curious as well. They even guessed that it was because he didn't trust Han Yunxi enough. East Qin's affairs were truly a secret. There was no need to announce it until the best moment, but he definitely announced it when the time came. This status was his pride, his burden, and his responsibility. Even if he dreamed of establishing a new dynasty and ushering in a new era for Cloud Realm Continent, he still had to acknowledge his status and respect East Qin's history. He carried too many hopes on his shoulders. He could complain of being tired, but he couldn't complain about being wronged, because these were all innate responsibilities. As the East Qin Crown Prince, he had to shoulder them. Why didn't he tell Han Yunxi these things? Even he didn't know why. If Han Yunxi found out his identity, what would her reaction be? Based on his understanding of her, she'd probably be happy and pleasantly surprised. However, what would happen if she found out about his identity? He couldn't guess. For every matter, as long as it started, he had a plan in his heart and knew the outcome. Only this matter was out of his control. He didn't know if he couldn't control himself or her. Seeing Long Fei Yi spacing out, Kinzo nudged him. "What are you thinking about? Everyone saw how that girl protected you at the abstinence hall. What, are you on guard against her as well?" Kinzo asked. Long Fei Yi didn't want to talk about this topic, so he replied half-heartedly, "My life is in her hands. How can I not be on guard?" Kinzo laughed out loud. "If you're on guard against her, then she won't be the one to hurt you." "Ha, that's right. If he was still on guard against her, then he wouldn't be sincere. If he wasn't sincere, how could Han Yunxi make his lust bite power disappear?" "That's great." Long Fei Yi said something against his will. He even hid Han Yunxi's identity from Kinzo. After Mute Granny died, he was the only one left in the world who knew about Han Yunxi's identity. Not long ago, he found out that someone else also knew about it. Although they weren't on the same path, he still hoped that that person wouldn't betray his trust. The master and disciple were silent for a long time. After exiting the secret passage, they walked through a mountain path and arrived at the mysterious ice cave where the Venerable One cultivated. Even though it was midsummer, the cold air was still blowing in their faces. It was as cold as the northern wind in December. A Venerable One was already waiting at the door. The Venerable One cultivated wholeheartedly. He didn't care about the secular world, nor did he interfere. The reason why he helped was because of the lust-bite power. Once the lust-bite power was used, it was invincible in the martial arts world. No one in the East Qin Imperial clan had successfully cultivated it. And before the lust-bite power fell into the hands of the East Qin Imperial clan, no one in the martial arts world had successfully cultivated it. The Venerable One hoped that one day he would be able to see the true power of the lust-bite power from Long Fei Yi. Kinzo sent Long Fei Yi to the entrance of the cave and couldn't help but sigh. When will you find someone who can dual cultivate with you? To be able to dual cultivate with Long Fei Yi and help him reach the invincible realm, it had to be a martial arts genius. This genius would be able to withstand the lust-bite power in his Dantian. The sword sect master doted on Duanmu Yao because her innate talents were similar to Luo Qingling's. Still, Long Fei was more or less a factor as well. Although Duanmu Yao hadn't reached the level of being able to withstand the lust-bite power, he had always secretly hoped that Duanmu Yao could lay a good foundation so that one day she could dual cultivate with Long Fei Yi. Seeing that she had a home, seeing that she had a better life than Qingling, he felt some comfort in his heart. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. After that night of madness, he hadn't mentioned Duanmu Yao again, but that didn't mean he had forgotten about his injury. Madness was to expose the injury and vent the pain. If he wasn't mad, he had to hide the injury and cover the pain. Was it better to be mad or not? The feeling was like drinking water. Only the person would know if it was hot or cold. Long Fei Yi was about to enter the cave when he suddenly turned around. Master, I've already found this person. Kinzo was very shocked and blurted out, "Who is it?" His mind unconsciously began to search for experts in the martial arts world. Someone with that kind of talent had to be a top expert. Unfortunately, even after thinking about all the experts he knew of in the martial arts world, he still couldn't guess who it was. Chapter 772. Kinzo couldn't guess, but he was both surprised and delighted. He wasn't afraid that this person would be hard to find, or that they wouldn't cooperate with Long Fei Yi's dual cultivation. He was only afraid that such a person didn't exist in this world. "Fei, hurry and tell me. Just who is it?" Kinzo was so nervous that he lost his composure, but Long Fei Yi only smiled at him. "It's a secret, Fei. You're not deceiving Master, are you? Fei, tell me, just who is it?" "Stinking brat. Stop right there. Did you hear me? Just who is it? Is it a man or a woman? How old is he? What's your relationship with him or her? When did you find this person?" Kinzo had a pile of questions. He chased after Long Fei Yi for a few steps, but Long Fei Yi didn't pay him any attention. He was furious. If not for Long Fei Yi's tight schedule, he would have chased after him and interrogated him thoroughly. This stinking brat shouldn't be lying to me. When did he find someone who could dual cultivate with him? He's too good at hiding. He even hid it from his master. Just who is it? For the next few days, Long Fei Yi and the honored elders were both in closed-door cultivation. Kinzo was depressed by the word secret. Of course, he didn't forget to tell Bailey Mingxiang the truth. He wanted Bailey Mingxiang to play along and lure the snake out of its hole. Bailey Mingxiang was very calm after learning the truth. She settled down in the room next to Long Fei Yi's recuperation room and entered Long Fei Yi's room 3 times a day, staying for about an hour each time. An hour was exactly the time she needed to perform acupuncture. Unfortunately, she had to watch over the empty room and pass each day like a year. She'd been on Celestial Mountain for days now, but she still hadn't seen His Highness Duke of Qin. It was impossible to say that she wasn't a bit disappointed. She didn't think she was that noble. If feelings could be controlled, then what was the point of liking or disliking someone? How could she feel happy or unhappy? Emotions could not be controlled, but they could be restrained. Bailey Mingxiang was also a person who would let her imagination run wild. She sat at the tea table and thought about a lot of things. What he thought about the most was the secret of the phoenix birthmark on the Princess Consort's back. If there was a day when His Highness found out about the Princess Consort's past, would His Highness still dote on the Princess Consort? If there was a day when the Princess Consort found out about her past, would she still like His Highness? If they became enemies in the end, where would her heart go? She would not reveal this secret, but she knew that this secret would be revealed one day. At the very least, the identity of His Highness could not be hidden forever. Looking at the tea set that His Highness Duke of Qin had used, Bailey Mingxiang unconsciously reached out. However, before she could touch the master's cup, she sighed softly and withdrew her hand. Suppose one day they stopped loving each other, then would she be able to love? Thinking up to here, Bailey Mingxiang suddenly broke into a self-mocking laugh. What was wrong with her today? Why did she have to think so much? Even if there was a day when they stopped loving each other, she could not love. He was her master, and she was a servant. Why did she have to love him? Besides, how could they not love each other? Even if they found out about her past, they would still love each other. It would just be a matter of hate. Love and hate intertwined, entangling each other for eternity. Esteemed Princess Consort, if such a day comes, please believe in His Highness Duke of Qin, Bailey Mingxiang muttered to herself. It was almost time for today's treatment. Bailey Mingxiang packed up her needles and went out. There were 2 attendants waiting outside the door. They often chatted with her, and today was no exception. Miss Bailey, is His Highness Duke of Qin's injuries better? One of the attendants asked. Bailey Mingxiang sighed softly. With such serious injuries, it will take at least a year or so for him to recover. Didn't you come? What kind of needles did you use? Where is esteemed Princess Consort? Is she not coming back? The attendant asked again. You won't understand even if I tell you. I'm leaving. As Bailey Mingxiang was about to leave, the attendant asked again, Miss Mingxiang, won't you follow His Highness Duke of Qin for more than a year? Bailey Mingxiang smiled, but didn't answer. When night fell, she would have to practice martial arts with the old Kenzo, so she had to go back and sleep first. No matter what, she had to do her best to make this act real and complete her mission. Almost at the same time that Bai Yanqing arrived at Medical City, news of Bailey Mingxiang's visit to Celestial Mountain reached his ears. Bailey Mingxiang? Bai Yanqing muttered to himself. Beauty's blood. When Junie Xie had brought back a drop of poisoned blood from Yuzhou Island, it had taken him a long time to figure out that it was not only Beauty's blood, but also the blood of a mermaid. It was precisely because of that drop of blood that he began to question Long Fei Ye's origins. Does she know martial arts? Bai Yanqing asked. The messenger replied truthfully, we've investigated her. She's the youngest daughter of the Bailey family. For some reason, Han Yunxi took her in as a maidservant. She knows medicine and poisons, but not martial arts. Bai Yanqing was an extremely suspicious person. He fell silent and began to ponder a few questions. Bailey Mingxiang's blood was highly toxic. This meant that Long Fei Yi had used her to cultivate Beauty's blood. Those who could cultivate Beauty's blood had to have a different body type, and those who cultivated Beauty's blood would die. Bailey Mingxiang had probably been saved by Han Yunxi. It wasn't easy to cure Bailey Mingxiang's poison. To be precise, it was an extremely difficult task. Bailey Mingxiang was just a servant. If she wasn't still useful, why would Han Yunxi save her? Could it be that Long Fei Yi had asked Han Yunxi to save Bailey Mingxiang? Also, why did Bailey Mingxiang come to Tianshan Mountain at this time? Was it really to treat Long Fei Yi with acupuncture? Did she know martial arts or not? Find an opportunity to test her and see if she knows martial arts, Bai Yanqing ordered in a low voice. After the messenger left, Bai Yuqiao came over. Master, my subordinates have interrogated her no less than 5 times. That girl Su Xiaoyu couldn't explain clearly about the phoenix birthmark. I ordered people to test her before. Based on her answers, I'm afraid that she really doesn't know about it and has never seen it before. So, the Chu family, and even Long Fei, he doesn't know about it? Bai Yanqing seemed to be somewhat happy. Master, what's the matter? What does the phoenix birthmark look like? Bai Yuqiao asked boldly. Bai Yanqing was in a good mood today. He didn't give Bai Yuqiao any attitude. Instead, he laughed and said to himself, it seems that they don't know the truth. Then this game will be even more interesting. The old man is looking forward to it. Seeing that his master was in a good mood, Bai Yuqiao quickly took the opportunity to ask, Master, when will the good show begin? Even if his master didn't reveal the secret of the phoenix birthmark, he would at least reveal something related to it, right? Bai Yuqiao felt that this matter had something to do with Han Yunxi. Judging from his master's tone, Han Yunxi probably had the birthmark. His master had only interrogated Su Xiaoyu to confirm whether Chu Tianyin, Long Fei Yi, and the rest knew what the birthmark meant. A good show. Bai Yanqing stroked his beard with a smile. Wait until the Apricot Woods Conference is over. Little lass, this will be the biggest show in Cloud Realm Continent's history. The best show ever. Just you wait. After the Apricot Woods Conference, Ning Chung would take care of Chu Tianyin as well. It was time for him to head south. As long as Ning Chung did that, he would definitely reveal Long Fei Ye's secret to the public. He'd like to see how Long Fei Ye would fight against Ning Cheng's redcoat cannoneers and thousands of cavalry then. Master, that Apricot Woods Conference, there's nothing to watch? Bai Yuqiao didn't understand. Bai Yanqing suddenly knitted his brows. Lass, the Apricot Woods Conference is Cloud Realm Continent's medical community's greatest gathering. There's plenty to watch, so you have to watch carefully for your master. Medicine and poisons have many similarities. Poisons doctors also fall under the category of medicine. Bai Yanqing's motives for coming to the Apricot Woods Conference were simple. Besides investigating Medical City's movements against the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, he was really here to learn. He wanted to treat this gathering as a vacation to recuperate his body and mind. Only then would he have the energy to fight a proper battle with Long Fei Yi. Bai Yuqiao felt resentful. She wasn't interested in the Apricot Woods Conference at all, so she probed, Master, why don't we go take a look at the Poison Sect's forbidden grounds? That's the birthplace of the poison world, after all. Finally, Bai Yanqing fell silent. Bai Yuqiao still wanted to bring up senior brother's matter, but seeing this, she could only shut her mouth obediently. Han Yunxi's group had also arrived at Medical City, arriving a few days earlier than Bai Yanqing. Han Yunxi had gained a new understanding of Gu Beiwei during this trip. This fellow actually knew the fastest mountain path to Medical City and had taken them over 3 barren mountains without getting lost. Instead, he'd saved them 5 days of travel. Moreover, what Han Yunxi hadn't expected was that Gu Beiwei actually had a large residence in Medical City. Gu Beiwei hadn't even mentioned it the last time they came. Currently, they were inside the residence. Esteemed Wang Fei, 7th young master, look at what this is. Gu Beiwei handed over 3 invitations to the Apricot Woods Conference. You're quite capable. Gu glanced at them and gave them a rare compliment. In truth, he could have gotten an invitation to the Apricot Woods Conference just the same, but he couldn't be bothered to listen to Luo Zuishan's nagging. I didn't expect you to have such good friends in Medical City, Han Yunxi teased. Gu Beiwei had grown up in Medical City. Although he didn't like to socialize, he still had many friends. Han Yunxi hadn't expected that Gu Beiwei's friends in Medical City would still be willing to help him now that the Commander-in-Chief's estate in South Ning was in trouble and he was a member of Pill Fiend Pharmacy. What kind of friendship was this? Dr. Gu, just what are your origins? Gu was the first to speak. In truth, Han Yunxi had also wanted to ask this question along the way, but she didn't know how to broach the subject. Gu Beiwei didn't panic and maintained his warm smile. My surname is Gu. My ancestors have a deep relationship with Medical City's Gu clan. When my grandfather was alive, he was always kind to others. Thanks to him, many of Medical City's great aristocratic families are friends with me. Gu Beiwei smiled and teased. They all think I'm abandoning the dark for the light this time, These were naturally lies. Gu Beiwei's surname wasn't actually Gu. It was just a surname the Shadow Clan had changed to hide their identity. Back when the Shadow Clan hid in Medical City, the Gu clan was Medical City's #1 clan, so the Shadow Clan took on the surname Gu. The Shadow Clan's surname was Gu. They lived their lives as shadows and solitude. Gu Beyue's real name was Gu Beiyue. He was born on the 15th night of the 8th lunar month, when the bright moon hung high in the sky. Thus, his grandfather gave him the name Yu. Gu wanted to ask more questions, but Gu Beiyue cleverly changed the topic. Seventh young master, your surname is also Gu. Perhaps we were even family 500 years ago. Gu instantly lost interest in this topic. He sneered, I'm going out for a walk. It's already late. Where are you going? Han Yunqi asked. The Apricot Woods Conference was the day after tomorrow. It wouldn't be easy to reach Medical City smoothly. She didn't want anything to happen in the last 2 days. Gu turned back and smiled devastatingly. Poison lass, I'm going to prepare a big gift for Gu Yuntian. Gu Beiyue left for 2 days. He only appeared when Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue were both at the entrance of the Apricot Woods Conference. Chapter 773. It wasn't until Han Yunqi and Gu Beiyue reached the entrance of the Apricot Woods Conference that Gu suddenly poked his head out from behind Han Yunqi. Poison lass, good morning. Han Yunqi jumped in fright when she saw Gu's disguised face. She almost didn't realize it was him, but the words poison lass helped her recover quickly. This guy's finally showing up. Han Yunqi silently exhaled. Did I scare you? Gu asked with a grin. Where's the big gift? Gu had said he was going to prepare a big gift for Gu Yuntian, but he'd taken 2 days to prepare. It was hard for Han Yunqi not to be curious. Gu seemed to be in a good mood. Even though he was wearing a human skin mask, his smile was still beautiful. It's ready, he said. I'll give it to him when I see him later. Han Yunqi figured that the gift had to be related to the poison sect. Gu was the adopted son of the Medical Academy's head elder, so his poison skills were exquisite. Perhaps he'd studied them since he was young. This guy is probably going to expose the Medical Academy's true colors today. And I'll wait and see. Han Yunqi was looking forward to it, but Gu Beiyue's eyes flashed with pity when he saw Gu's flower-like smile. Unfortunately, Han Yunqi didn't notice. They were about to enter the Apricot Woods when a disguised servant rushed over to report in a low voice. Esteemed Wang Fei, Ningqing defeated Chu Shifeng last night and led his troops south. General Bailey also led his troops north the night before yesterday. I'm afraid they'll fight the day after tomorrow at the earliest. Ningqing really is impatient. Han Yunqi smiled coldly. The day after tomorrow? Gu Beiyue grew amused. Long Fei Yi really is formidable. He even guessed the time so accurately. The day after tomorrow. The Apricot Woods Conference should be finished by then, right? The day after tomorrow? What plans? Han Yunqi smiled. Esteemed Wang Fei, if the Apricot Woods Conference goes smoothly, how about we go to the battlefield together? Gu Beiyue asked. Actually, this was what Long Fei Yi had asked him to ask. Okay. Han Yunqi didn't consider. She had long been unhappy with Ningqing. Gu didn't quite understand what they were talking about, and he was too lazy to figure it out. He pulled Han Yunqi's arm a little anxiously. Let's go. It's not over yet. Why are you talking about the day after tomorrow? The Apricot Woods Conference was really held in a large apricot forest. This apricot forest was located in the southwest of Medical City. It covered a very large area and belonged only to the medical college. Unless it was a special occasion, it was generally not open to the public. In the apricot forest, there were only apricot trees and nothing else. In the middle of the forest, there was a huge circular open space, which was the main venue of the conference. At this time, it was already full of distinguished guests. Han Yunqi's group of 3 had disguised themselves as doctors. Because they had an invitation, they smoothly passed through the guards and entered the apricot forest. The reason this event was called the Apricot Woods Conference wasn't only because it was held in the forest, but also because the forest was synonymous with traditional Chinese medicine. People often used the phrases apricot woods warm in spring and apricot woods full of praise to praise a doctor's medical skills and ethics. By the time Han Yunxi's group arrived at the venue, most of the people were already there. Everyone was chatting in groups of 3 or 5, making small talk and bonding, as expected of Cloud Realm's great conference. It's rare for friends from all over to have the chance to gather together. Han Yunxi said the word friends with special mockery. Now, all of Medical City's friends were probably their enemies. Being able to participate in Medical City's grand conference at least meant that they didn't oppose Medical City's full sanctions against the Commander-in-Chief's estate. Yes, it's rare for us to be able to coexist peacefully. Gu Beiyue sighed with emotion. Gu was still chuckling. Poison lass, you have quite a few friends too. Why don't you go say hello? Han Yunxi rolled her eyes at him and ignored him. However, she had to admit that many of the people present were her friends. Or rather, they used to be. Thanks to Gu Beiyue's invitation, they were seated in the 5th row, which was quite close to the front. In order to get a clear view of the big shots in the first 2 rows, they deliberately went around to the front and walked from the first row to the back. In addition to Medical City's people, foreign guests with high status also sat in the 1st and 2nd rows. Medicine City had sent the most people, including Elder Wang, his son, and 3 elders. These people weren't just friends. They'd even said that they'd served Long Fei in the past. Tian'an's representative was none other than young General Mu Qingwu. Han Yunxi's gaze lingered on Mu Qingwu for a while. She hadn't seen him for a long time, but he still looked the same. Those thick eyebrows and large eyes couldn't hide anything. However, Han Yunxi didn't know if this man was still as open and upright as before. Sitting next to Mu Qingwu was also someone she hadn't seen in a long time. It was Western Zhou's crown prince, Duanmu Bei. Han Yunxi had to admit that she was narrow-minded. She didn't have a good impression of this guy to begin with. But when she thought of Duanmu Yao, she hated him even more. The changes and internal strife in Western Zhou had caused the once arrogant crown prince to more or less rein in his temper. He was currently whispering to Mu Qingwu with his head lowered, but she couldn't hear what they were whispering about. Han Yunxi only felt that these 2 precious little sister protectors were quite compatible sitting together. Looking to the right, she saw that the person sitting next to Duanmu Bei was actually an envoy from Northern Li. Northern Li and Western Zhou had been at odds for so many years, but now that they'd come to Medical City, they were willing to give Medical City face and sit together. No matter how strong Northern Li's military force was, they would still have to give in to Medical City. When Jun Yixie's identity as a member of the 100 Poison sect was exposed, Medical City had pressured the Northern Li imperial family. When it was revealed that Ouyang Ningjing had colluded with Jun Yixie to plant medicinal herbs in the snowy mountains of Northern Li, Medical City had directly denounced the Northern Li imperial family. The Northern Li imperial family could only remove Jun Yixie's title as an explanation to Medical City. The envoy from Northern Li was a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. He wore a long gray robe and had a goatee. Han Yunxi had never seen this person before. She walked past him and saw the name plate on the table that read Head of Northern Li's Imperial Hospital, Naza Dellen. Because Han Yunxi was looking at the name plate, she didn't notice the steps under her feet. She missed a step and was about to fall down, but the maid beside Naza Dellen caught her. Gu Beiyue and Gu were behind her, but it was too late to help her. Be careful. The maid's voice was quite pleasant. Han Yunxi raised her head and saw that the maid was about 16 or 17 years old. She had a pair of especially bright eyes. Han Yunxi couldn't help but think of Su Xiaoyu. Su Xiaoyu's eyes were even prettier than hers. Many thanks. She stood up. It's nothing. The maid quickly returned to her position. At this time, Naza Dellen turned around and glanced at Han Yunxi. He didn't take it seriously. Gu Beiyue hurriedly chased after Han Yunxi and whispered, "Is your foot okay?" Before Han Yunxi could reply, Gu Qishao scooted to the other side and murmured, "Lass, did you twist your ankle? Let me help you rub it?" Han Yunxi didn't say anything. She stared to the right. Gu Beiyue and Gu followed her gaze and saw a familiar figure not far away. "Family head Xiao," Han Yunxi said through gritted teeth. As the head of the #1 family in the South Central region, Family head Xiao represented all the major families in the South Central region. His arrival was obviously a slap to the commander-in-chief's office and Long Fei Ye's face. Could it be that he couldn't defeat the Bailey army in the south-central region? So he came to Medical City to seek outside help? How bold! Gu Beiwei was also quite shocked. Indeed, Han Yunqi was still relatively calm. She continued to look for a seat. When they found it, the three of them were very surprised and looked at each other in dismay. The people sitting next to them were none other than Tang Li and Ning Jing. Han Yunqi and the others were in disguise, so Tang Li and Ning Jing naturally couldn't recognize them. However, Han Yunqi saw Tang Li's immortal-like handsome face at first glance. Ning Jing was sitting upright and still, looking ahead expressionlessly. Tang Li was like a slave to his wife. He held her arm with a fawning expression and whispered in her ear from time to time. It didn't seem like he was whispering, but more like he was asking for forgiveness after making a mistake. Judging from their seats, it seemed that the Ouyang Chamber of Commerce had received the invitation and Ning Jing brought Tang Li to attend. Han Yunqi sat down by Tang Li's side. Her lips curled into a smile as she maintained her composure. As soon as she sat down, she faintly heard all kinds of mushy and explicit words of love from Tang Li to make Ning Jing happy. Han Yunqi thought she was very calm, but in the end, she couldn't stand it and changed seats with Gu. She sat between Gu Beiwei and Gu. She couldn't help but think that Long Fei Yi and Tang Li were blood relatives. Why was there such a big gap between the two brothers? The words that Tang Li said, Long Fei Yi probably couldn't say it in his lifetime. Long Fei Yi couldn't say it, but Gu could. He listened to Tang Li's whispers and whispered to Han Yunqi, "Poison girl." Guess what he said? Han Yunqi wanted to say that she didn't want to listen, but Gu had already whispered in her ear, "You must not know how much I love you. For you, I can give up everything, including myself." Do you believe it? Tang Li's original words were, "Jing, you must not know how much I love you. For you, I can give up everything in the Tang sect, including myself." Do you believe it? But Gu Qishao had left out Jing, and Tang clan in his story. It wasn't clear whether he'd done it on purpose or not, but Han Yunqi felt uncomfortable listening to it. She really felt like Gu Qishao was confessing to her. She felt that it was more appropriate for her to change seats with Gu Beiwei. Just as she was about to get up, Gu pressed her hand down and asked again, "Do you believe it? What do I have to do to make you believe it? I'm not playing with you, and I won't joke with you. From the moment I met you, except for hiding my identity, everything I said to you was true. I'm sincere. Do you believe it? Answer me." Han Yunqi was stunned. Her heart was thumping wildly. How could she not understand Gu's feelings? She didn't like how he was always so playful and joked about everything. However, when he stopped joking with her one day and leaned close to her and whispered sweet nothings to her in such a gentle and serious voice, she realized that she couldn't resist and didn't know what to do. "Gu, if it's always a joke, then we'll always be good friends. But if one day the joke turns out to be true, how can I continue to treat you as a friend?" Han Yunqi's face was a little pale. Gu suddenly chuckled and said in a low voice, "Poison girl, what are you doing? Don't tell me you're disgusted by Tang Li's words?" Han Yunqi's clenched heart suddenly relaxed. Tang Li had indeed hidden his identity and lied to Ning Jing from the moment he met her. When Gu had said those words, she had thought that he was talking about Gu Qishao's identity. How could she scare herself like that? "You're disgusting me. Can you shut up?" Han Yunqi said exasperatedly. Gu Qishao chuckled. "Poison lass, do you believe those words?" Before Han Yunqi could reply, Gu Qishao's bright, starry eyes abruptly turned cold and filled with ruthlessness. This was the first time that Han Yunqi had been frightened by Gu. She never knew that this pair of smiling eyes could be so frightening when they were angry. She followed his gaze and saw that the head of the medical college, Gu Yuntian, was already standing on the stage. Chapter 774. Han Yunqi had never seen Gu Yintian before, but she was certain that the old man on stage was the head of the medical academy, the #1 doctor in all of Cloud Realm Continent. That was because the noisy crowd had suddenly quieted down as everyone stood up, including the first row of Medical City's vice heads and elders. Who else but Gu Yintian had such power? But Gu Yintian didn't seem to have any of the dignity or haughtiness of a superior. He was in his 50s, but his temples were already grizzled. He was dressed in simple white robes without any decorations, giving him a clean, simple look. His face was benevolent and calm, like a researcher who didn't care about worldly affairs and buried himself in his work. It had to be said that his features were extremely good-looking. Even though he was old, it was easy to imagine what he looked like in his younger days. He must have been very handsome. Seeing him, Han Yunxi couldn't help but wonder if this academy head knew the truth behind the poison sex destruction. Did the ban on the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate come from his mouth? According to the Medical Academy's ranking system, there were 9 levels of medical skills. Gu Yintian was the only one to reach the 8th rank of Celestial Doctor. His innate talents were astonishing, and he was valued by the previous academy head at a young age. Han Yunxi heard that Gu Yintian was a low-key man who devoted himself to medical research. He had never married, but he was very accomplished in treating all sorts of ailments. His greatest expertise lay in treating infants and children. Han Yunxi had also heard that Gu Yintian was the first doctor in Cloud Realm Continent's medical history to do research on fetuses. He had a unique way of preventing and treating fetuses' ailments. He was the one who came up with the concept of eugenics, which contributed greatly to Cloud Realm Continent's medical progress. After all, Cloud Realm Continent's medical community was a complete blank in this field before his arrival. Because of his unique fetus research, he was able to sit firmly on the throne of the Medical Academy at a young age and even become an 8th-rank Celestial Doctor. Han Yunxi had always been puzzled by this. How did Gu Yintian do research on fetuses? No matter how miraculous the Medical Academy's medical skills were, there were still limits to medical treatment in this era. How did Gu Yintian study a fetus hidden deep in the womb that couldn't be seen? Just from the mother's pulse? The condition of the fetus could be detected from the mother's pulse, but the things that could be detected were very limited. Even if the disease could be detected, how could it be treated? How many repetitive experiments did they have to go through? Other than his research on fetuses and infants, Han Yunxi had also heard that Gu Yintian was very good at preventing epidemics. Even now, many of Cloud Realm Continent's most widely used anti-pestilence medicines were developed by Medicine City with the help of his research materials. Leaving aside his research methods, Gu Yuntian's contributions to the medical community and Cloud Realm Continent citizens were truly admirable. However, Han Yunxi was a professional. She was very clear about the history of medical research. Modern pharmaceutical and medical research basically used white mice for experiments. Because the genetic sequence of white mice was similar to that of humans, the pathological reactions and pharmacological reactions in white mice could be used as a reference for humans. And in ancient times, where did the concept of gene sequences come from? No one would ever believe that mice were similar to humans, much less use them for medical research. Medicine was all about experimentation. In ancient times, every advancement in medical science was accompanied by huge sacrifices. Either a large-scale epidemic occurred with countless patients, countless dead, and countless cases for medical researchers to study and figure out the pathology in medicine. Or an extremely unique case occurred, allowing them to discover many things from a single case. As for preventing epidemics, Gu Yintian might have used infected patients or even corpses for research. Then what about preventing diseases in fetuses? Han Yunxi had long read through Cloud Realm Continent's medical history, but she didn't find any major epidemics related to pregnant women in the past 100 years. Why did Gu Yintian want to study fetuses? Which fetuses did he use for research? Han Yunxi had pondered these questions while investigating Medical City. She could faintly smell that something fishy was going on, but she didn't have time to think about it then. According to Long Fei Ye's plans, they were supposed to deal with Medical City after Northern Li. None of them expected things to develop to this point. While the world was still in chaos, they had to face Medical City head-on. Now that she saw the old man on stage, Han Yunxi couldn't help but wonder. Since she was here today, Han Yunxi planned to ask him some questions and get to the bottom of things. Right now, she was more concerned about Gu. Old fiend, do you have a deep grudge against him? Han Yunxi asked in a low voice. Gu should hate his foster father, Head Elder Ling, more after being banished from Medical City, right? Head Elder Ling had long been kicked out of Medical City, so he didn't show up today. I don't... Gu turned back. Despite his rage, he was still able to smile in front of Han Yunxi. I do. He owes me, Chi brother, huge debt. It's been several years now, both principal and interest. Today, I'm collecting it all and giving it to you. Han Yunxi didn't know why, but her heart was in turmoil and unease. Just what do you want? You know about the poison sect, don't you? Shoo. Gu pressed a finger against Han Yunxi's lips. His fingers were so cold that Han Yunxi instinctively dodged. Her warm lips couldn't warm up to his coldness at all. Gu Qishao pressed Han Yunxi down and scooted close until he was almost by her ear. Poison lass, be good. There's no rush. Gu Beiwei glanced over, wanting to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he pretended not to see anything. By now, Gu Yintian had already indicated for everyone to take their seats. Old man would like to represent the Medical Academy to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to visit Medical City. Old man is deeply gratified to see everyone paying attention to the development of Cloud Realm Continent's medical industry. Old man also hopes that today's meeting won't disappoint everyone. Gu Yuntian's voice was loud, steady, and powerful. Every word was clear. At his words, the crowd broke into applause. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiwei didn't move, but Tang Li was still coaxing Ning Jing. Gu actually clapped along with the crowd. However, he patted Gu Yuntian's head very slowly. He patted Gu Yuntian's head with interest. The way he looked at Gu Yuntian was as if he was looking at an irreconcilable enemy, or as if he was looking at a prey that he had to catch. Everyone stopped clapping, but Gu Yuntian kept clapping until there was no sound at all. Gu Yuntian paused, then added, "The Apricot Woods Conference, as well as every grand ceremony of the medical community, is a step forward. It concerns every single one of us here, as well as the lives of millions of Cloud Realm Continent citizens. This is my medical city's honor and responsibility. My medical city doesn't have the wealth to guarantee everyone a life of luxury. We don't have the military to protect everyone's homes. But we doctors can protect everyone from illnesses and keep their lives at bay." Gu Yuntian's words were so passionate that the audience applauded and praised him nonstop. Han Yunxi's smile was scornful to the bone. Today, she'd seen what it meant to be a refined scum. If not for the fear of being kicked out and ruining Gu Beiwei and Gu's plans, she would have stood up and questioned this academy head Gu. Just how did he have the face to mention Cloud Realm Continent's millions of citizens? How many sick people in the South Central regions couldn't be treated because of Medical City's restrictions? If Gu Beiwei hadn't found a group of doctors to support them, the South Central regions would have long suffered from a plague. Medical City had neither wealth nor an army, but its restrictions on the South Central regions were no less than violence. Medical City is not a country. We've always stayed in a remote corner and never participated in any battles. I'm sure everyone knows this. Now that the remnants of the poison sect have reappeared in Cloud Realm Continent with hordes of poison corpses to poison the world, and the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate is harboring Han Yunxi and Gu. My medical city won't sit by and do nothing. The poison sect originated from Medical City, so we have the responsibility to destroy them and protect Cloud Realm Continent. Gu Yintian grew more and more agitated as he spoke. He raised his hand and proclaimed, "Everyone has a responsibility for the rise and fall of the world. Everyone, before the Apricot Woods Conference begins. Old Man represents the Medical Academy to implore everyone to put aside all disputes and work together against the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate. We must kill the remnants of the poison sect and destroy the army of poisoned corpses to protect our Cloud Realm continent citizens. I, Gu Yintian, beg you all? Han Yunshi sucked in a cold breath at his words. She assumed that Gu Yuntian's opening speech was just a pretense to disgust everyone. She never expected the old thing to have such wild ambitions. He wanted to unite all of Cloud Realm Continent's powers to attack the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate. Wasn't this going too far? Han Yunshi suddenly realized. Medical City's most frightening move wasn't to cut off medical supplies, but to give all of Cloud Realm Continent's powers a righteous reason to work together to destroy one of them. It was impossible for Northern Li and Tianning to work together. Northern Li and Western Zhou, as well as Tiannan, were unlikely to work together again after the war. However, with Medical City as the middleman to ensure that all parties received equal benefits and that there would be no betrayals or defections in the alliance, these forces were naturally more than happy to join forces. They weren't working together to help Medical City destroy the poison sect and protect Tianning, but to divide up their prey. The South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate and Long Fei Yi had long been a thorn in their side. If they set aside their grudges and worked together to destroy the Long Fei Yi, not only would they get a share of the South Central regions, but they'd also get rid of a powerful enemy. Why wouldn't they do it? Han Yunshi finally understood why Long Fei Yi had placed Medical City behind attacking Northern Li. Her entire back was drenched in cold sweat. She couldn't imagine what would happen to the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate if Gu Beiwei didn't win today. If Gu didn't win today, what would happen to the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate? On one side, Tang Li couldn't even be bothered to coax Ning Jing as he stared at the stage in shock. Han Yunshi looked towards Gu Beiwei and saw that he was staring at Gu Beiwei. Gu's sinister gaze never left Gu Yuntian. Chapter 775. Could it be that even Gu Beiwei wasn't confident? So he'd placed all his hopes on Gu? But just what did Gu Qixiao want to do? Dr. Gu, Han Yunshi murmured. Gu Beiwei finally recovered his wits and smiled at Han Yunshi. Don't worry. At this moment, a man who looked like a military officer stood up from the crowd and declared loudly, Academy Head Gu, Tianning's great General Ning has already sent troops south. Our Tianning Empire would rather cooperate with Medical City's arrangements and disregard our former enmity to unite all sides to destroy the poison sect and protect Tianning. How could my Western Zhou miss out on such a righteous cause? Duanmu Bei immediately raised his hand. A man sitting next to the Northern Li doctor also raised his right hand. Count my Northern Li in. Han Yunshi took advantage of His Highness Duke of Qin's absence to collude with the Bailey army and monopolize military and political power. Our 5 great clans have been framed for injustice. Old Man has come today to ask everyone to save the South Central region's citizens. Clan head Xiao stood up. As expected, there were no eternal alliances or eternal enemies. There were only eternal benefits. For the sake of benefits, allies could kill each other and brothers could betray each other. For the sake of benefits, old enemies could ally and different races could walk the same path. How could any of these people care about the lives of the common people? What righteousness? All they wanted was benefits. Once they destroyed the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate, they could divide the fertile lands between themselves. Han Yunshi looked coldly at Mu Qingwu. She found it strange that Tian would send a young general like Mu Qingwu to the Apricot Woods Conference. As it turned out, Tian had long predicted that Medical City would make such a move. Medicine City didn't express their stance, but they'd long cut off all supplies to the South Central region's commander-in-chief's estate. Several other great clans expressed their stance, but Mu Qingwu still didn't say anything. Perhaps she still had a trace of hope for this upright man. But Han Yunshi stared fixedly at Mu Qingwu. Unfortunately, Mu Qingwu had disappointed her in the end. Mu Qingwu raised his hand. Tian is willing to work together with everyone. With a soft sigh, Han Yunshi turned her head back. Her disappointment wasn't because Mu Qingwu didn't remember her as a savior, nor did he care for old sentiments. She was simply disappointed that such a straightforward man, such a righteous general, could protect his little sister. But when it came to matters of right and wrong, he actually approved of Medical City's despicable methods of threatening the common people's lives. Mu Qingwu despised Medical City very much. He was indignant, but there was nothing he could do. Before he came to Medical City, his father had warned him repeatedly that he must act according to the situation and not stand out. Father's orders could not be disobeyed, and military orders could not be disobeyed even more. For the sake of helping Han Yunxi, he'd once disobeyed his father and contradicted him. But he'd never disobeyed a military order. He'd been in the army since he was a child and knew that military orders were like mountains that couldn't be disobeyed. Almost all of the powers had expressed their stance. Han Yunxi had finally witnessed Medical City's powerful rallying power, as well as their most hypocritical faces. This was the first time in her life that she'd been so serious and fervent in her desire to join hands with Long Fei Yi to destroy all of these powers today. They'd ruthlessly trample on their hypocritical faces and conquer all of Cloud Realm Continent. Then they'd establish a brand new nation with a new set of world rules. Gu Yintian was very satisfied with the enthusiastic responses of the various powers. He raised his hands to signal for everyone to quiet down. Since everyone shares the same sentiments as Medical City and wants to rid the people of evil, then I hope that everyone will stay for a few more days after the Apricot Woods Conference ends. Old Man will take the lead, and we'll discuss how to eliminate the remnants of the poison sect together. Before anyone could respond, a vine suddenly shot out from the ground by his feet. In a flash, it grew into countless vines that surrounded Gu Yintian with bared fangs and brandished claws. In a flash, everyone rose to their feet in alarm. Medical City's guards immediately rushed onto the stage to hack at the vines with their swords. "There's an assassin. Who's there? Come out. Someone come, surround the scene. Don't let anyone leave." Everyone panicked, but no one dared to move. Gu Yintian lived up to his name as Medical City's leader. Despite being surrounded by vines, he was still very calm. He even signaled for his guards to withdraw. He gently stroked the vines with a smile. "Thorns, this counts as a type of medicine. What if I told you that this is a type of poison?" Gu stood up and walked step by step towards the stage. Although Gu Yintian didn't show any fear, he stopped stroking the vines. "Who are you? You clearly have the ability to kill Old Man. So why don't you? What do you want?" Gu Yintian asked. He was right. If Gu could plant a seed at his feet without anyone noticing, then he had the ability to make the vines kill him. Only then did Medical City's people relax. Every year, there were many family members of patients who came to seek treatment. When they couldn't get what they wanted, they resorted to extreme measures. Thus, everyone assumed that Gu Qixiao had come to seek treatment. Sneaking into the Apricot Woods Conference to seek treatment was a smart idea. Academy head Gu couldn't refuse in front of everyone, so he could only make an exception. However, Gu's answer surprised everyone. He didn't stand on the stage, but below. Coldly, he looked up at Gu Yintian. "I'm here to seek justice." Finally, even Gu Yintian was shocked. "Just who are you?" Gu Qixiao tore off his human skin mask to reveal his bewitching, seductive features. If this face of hers smiled, it would definitely be devastatingly beautiful and bewitching. Unfortunately, Gu didn't smile. Even his eyes were cold, without a trace of warmth. Even Han Yunxi, who saw his smile most often, couldn't help but feel fear. She grew uneasy. Something big must be going on between Gu and Gu Yintian. Gu Qixiao was absolutely serious this time. Her peerlessly beautiful appearance shocked everyone present. "He's Gu. He's the one who summoned a horde of poisoned corpses to attack Carefree City." Yes, he's Gu. He must be from the poison sect too. He must be. Only someone from the poison sect can raise so many poison corpses. It's too terrifying. Surround him. Don't let him escape. Cries of alarm grew louder, but no one dared to take a step forward. Northern Li's imperial physician, Nazadelin, stared at Gu in shock. It took him a long time to recover his wits. Gu and Gu Yuntian ignored the growing clamor. Coldly, they stared at each other as if everything around them had nothing to do with them. They were in a world of their own. Beneath the calm surface of this world, there were perilous waves that only they could comprehend. Mountains crumbled, and the earth cracked. If Gu Yuntian hadn't believed head elderling's guess before, he did now. Gu was Shao-Chi Sha, his son. Shao-Chi hadn't lost his memories. Shao-Chi had returned. Shao-Chi had come back for revenge. Back then, as Shao-Chi had lost his memories, Gu Yuntian and head elderling had put on a show for the people of Medical City. They planned to banish Shao-Chi from the city, then secretly kidnap him and lock him up for further research. But Shao-Chi had vanished into thin air after leaving Medical City. Their pursuers had dug 3 feet into the ground within a 100-li radius, but they still hadn't found him. Many years later, when Shao-Chi had grown up and established Medicine Ghost Valley, Gu Yuntian finally learned that the child was still alive. Actually, he'd already guessed that Shao-Chi had pretended to lose his memories in order to beat them at their own game and escape. How many years had it been? His Shao-Chi had finally come back. Back for revenge? Thinking up to here, Gu Yuntian suddenly smiled. He'd done everything so discreetly and cleanly that he hadn't left behind a single shred of evidence. So what if Shao-Chi knew the truth? What could he do? With Little Seven's status, who would believe the words of Little Seven? In truth, he'd been hoping for Shao-Chi's return. Only with Shao-Chi's return would he have a chance to continue his unfinished research. He couldn't understand how Little Seven's body recovered after the plague, even though he didn't have a pulse. How did he recover? How did his body recover? Gu stared coldly at Gu Yuntian, his lips curled in a contemptuous smile that made one's hair stand on end. Gu Yuntian knew that his smile was malicious, but he couldn't figure out what it was. The world seemed to come to a standstill. Father and son stared at each other from a distance, each with their own thoughts. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd. Maybe Gu is Han Yunxi's older brother, and they're all remnants of the poison sect. We have to kill them. Before he could finish speaking, Gu rushed out of the father and son's world. He turned to the source of the voice, his eyes as fierce as a wolf's as he roared. Nonsense. Be careful that I don't poison your mouth. I'm not related to Han Yunxi at all. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Did he have to despise her bloodline so much? Gu Beiwa smiled helplessly. Just how much does this guy care about this? He was so ferocious that everyone was intimidated. Everyone quieted down. The man trembled, but he still cared about his face and asked, "Who are you? How did you raise so many poison corpses?" Gu's lips curled into a contemptuous smile as he replied in a strange voice, "I'm Gu Chi Sha, head elderling's adopted son." At this point, he deliberately paused and turned to look at Gu Yuntian. This voice, he's Gu Chi Sha. He's Gu Chi Sha. How is this possible? Gu is actually Gu Chi Sha. He's from a medical academy. Gu Chi Sha Gu. He's Shao-Chi from all those years ago. Shao-Chi. There were many people from the medical world present. Many of them had been to Pilfine Valley and had seen Gu Chi Sha before. They had also heard his unique voice before. They were all extremely shocked. Even the older members of the medical academy were astonished. They had all seen Shao-Chi before. Shao-Chi had returned. Shao-Chi had been banished from Medical City because he had raised a poisonous plant in the medicinal field and had stolen medicinal herbs from the storehouse. In order to not tarnish Medical City's reputation, they had concealed the matter of the poisonous plant and only announced that Shao-Chi had been banished for theft. How had Shao-Chi managed to grow a poisonous plant back then? How had he learned how to raise poison corpses? Who had he learned it from? The vice presidents, the 3 elders, and the council members were all whispering to each other as they discussed the matter. Gu Yuntian woke up from his reverie of father and son staring at each other. He carefully studied Shao-Chi's face. He hadn't expected his son to be so handsome all of a sudden. He'd already forgotten what Shao-Chi's mother looked like. Xiao Qi probably resembled her more. Gu Yuntian's heart was wild with joy, but his expression remained calm. Xiao Qi, I didn't expect you to side with the poison sect. Chapter 776. Gu Yintian didn't deny that Gu was Gu Qi Sha, nor did he deny that he was Xiao Qi, who had been expelled from the medical academy all those years ago. He asked incredulously, Xiao Qi, I didn't think you'd side with the poison sect. His tone was filled with astonishment, shock, and anger. Compared to the past, Gu Yintian was even better at acting. However, Gu was no longer the gullible Xiao Qi of yesteryear. He chuckled, but his reply sent the crowd into an uproar. Father, he said, you taught me all my poison skills. Why did you side with the poison sect? You're much more powerful than the poison sect. There was too much information in this sentence. So much, so that when everyone heard the first word, they didn't have time to pay attention to the second word. Father. Father? Gu called Gu Yintian father? Heavens, did they hear wrong? Everyone was at a loss as they turned to look at the people next to them, hoping that they'd heard wrong. Even the medical academy's vice head and elders, who were closest to Gu, looked at each other in surprise. Gu Beiwei, what did he just say? Han Yinshi murmured. If this was Gu's surprise, his big gift, then it was too shocking. If she had to guess, she'd never be able to guess it in her lifetime. I really didn't expect. Gu Beiyue's usually calm eyes were filled with surprise. He'd long guessed that Gu was Gu Qi Sha, head elder Ling's adopted son. He also knew that there was something fishy about Gu Yuntian taking medicine since he was young. This impostor must know many secrets of the medical academy, and even his poison skills might have come from the poison sect's forbidden grounds. But he never expected this result. Gu was actually Gu Yuntian's son. Wasn't this joke a bit too much? The calmest people present were none other than Gu Qishao and Gu Yuntian. Gu Qishao's lips had maintained an enchanting smile from beginning to end, as if he was a bystander watching others make a fool of themselves. It had nothing to do with him. Gu Yuntian was already prepared for Xiao Qi to come back for revenge, so he had nothing to worry about. Xiao Qi, you're clearly Ling Gai's adopted son. Old man only agreed to let Ling Gai make an exception and let you stay in the medical school because he was moved by compassion. Who would have thought that not only did you not know how to be grateful, you even bit the hand that fed you. He'd stolen the medicinal ingredients back then, but now he'd thrown his lot in with the poison sect and come back to humiliate old man and the medical academy's reputation. What kind of good intentions do you have? Gu Yunqian's face was filled with rage. He wanted to rush in front of Gu Qishao, but was blocked by vines. He viciously waved aside the vines in front of him, allowing his palms to bleed from the punctures. Little Qi, you have to take responsibility for your words today. You have to speak clearly, or else don't even think of leaving Medical City. Father. Gu seemed to be doing it on purpose as he called his father again. Father was the only person who'd grown up with him. When he'd been hiding in the poison sect's forbidden grounds as a child, he'd had no mother or friends. It was hard to even see a single person. He only had his father. After being tricked into coming to the medical academy and becoming head elder Ling's adopted son, he'd refused to call him father, no matter what head elder Ling said. Perhaps even his father didn't know that this word was the only hope in his heart, the only thing he could rely on, the only hope for survival. Head elder Ling had always lied to him. As long as he was obedient and drank his medicine, he'd be able to see his father. In the end, he'd had no choice but to pretend that he'd lost his memories. Whenever he saw head elder Ling, he'd call him father, father, over and over again. From then on, the word had lost all meaning in his heart and became nothing more than a sarcastic word. Gu Qishao's voice was so natural and sweet that everyone present felt like they were father and son. Father, since you gave birth to me, why don't you dare acknowledge me? What are you afraid of? Gu asked with a chuckle. He looked so happy, but in front of everyone's eyes, his heart was probably bleeding, wasn't it? Everyone had old scars and they all felt pain from time to time. However, not everyone had the courage to tear open the old scars that had already formed scabs and exposed the bloody flesh in front of the public. Wasn't Gu afraid of pain the most? How could he smile like that? Han Yunqi still didn't know what was going on, but seeing Gu's carefree smile made her heart ache for no reason. Old man, you're afraid? Gu, you're the one who should be afraid. You're full of nonsense. Ask everyone here. Who's going to believe your nonsense? It was obvious that everyone was on Gu Yuntian's side. Of course I have evidence. If I didn't, would I be here to court death? Gu smiled casually. Gu Yuntian's heart gave a start, but he quickly calmed down. He'd already silenced everyone involved in the affair, including Gu Qixiao's birth mother and his wet nurse. He refused to believe that Gu Qixiao would be able to produce any evidence today. Evidence? Ha! Then let go of old man first. Take out the evidence and show it to everyone. Let this old man have a good look too. Today, in front of all the heroes, if it really was old man's fault, then old man won't be able to escape. If you're just making things up and slandering old man in Medical City, then don't blame old man for being impolite. Gu Yuntian's calmness reassured everyone present. After all, if Gu really was Gu Yuntian's son, then many things would be lost. All right. Gu waved his hand, and all the vines withered and fell to the ground. Gu Yuntian hurriedly walked away, finally safe. Where's the evidence? He coldly questioned. At this moment, everyone was staring at Gu, waiting for him to take out the so-called evidence. What is he trying to do? Han Yunqi had no confidence at all. Gu Beiwei frowned. This guy, not far away, the imperial physician from Northern Li also had a serious expression. His hawk-like sharp eyes were nailed to Gu, unable to move away. Waiting, in fact, was only a moment, but some people present couldn't wait any longer. Vice President Lin of the medical college shouted, Gu, where's the evidence? Take it out for us to see. That's right. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take it out for us to see. Don't tell me you can't take it out. Another vice president also shouted. Gu elegantly raised his hand, but rudely pointed at Gu Yuntian with his index finger. Do you dare to do a blood test? Once this was said, the whole place was silent. No one expected Gu to come up with this method. This wasn't any evidence, but it was the most effective and direct method. No matter if it was a paternity test or solving a case, it was widely used. For Gu to come up with this method, could it be that he was really confident? Could it be that he was really Gu Yuntian's son? Even the two vice presidents of the medical college shut their mouths. They couldn't help but look at Gu Yuntian, but Gu Yuntian was still calm, as if he wasn't afraid. Gu Yuntian wasn't afraid? But if Gu wasn't completely confident, he wouldn't have set himself up like this. For a moment, everyone was confused. They didn't know who to believe more. Han Yunqi was laughing. When she heard Gu Qixiao say, dripping blood to confirm kinship, she almost snorted. This method wasn't scientific at all, but Gu wasn't at a disadvantage when he used it. Blood test was regarded as the standard to verify blood relations in this era. Not to mention Gu, even Gu Beiwei, who was beside her, and the number one in the medical field, Gu Yuntian believed in it without a doubt. There were two ways to identify kinship by blood. One was to identify kinship by bone, and the other was to combine blood. The so-called bone test was to find the remains of the biological father or mother and drip the blood on the bones. If the blood was absorbed by the bones, it could prove that they were related by blood. This method was mentioned in the very famous forensic medical book, Records of Innocence. Originally, this method was used to solve the case, but it ended up creating a false case, because different bones had different effects of blood dripping. If the bones had not withered, the structure was complete, and there was still soft tissue on the surface. Then no matter if the blood dripped from a relative or an outsider, it would not be absorbed by the bones. If the bones had decayed and become white bones, then the bones would be corroded and become soft. Then, no matter if the blood dripped from a relative or an outsider, it would be absorbed. Therefore, the bone drop identification was a probabilistic event. Luckily, Gu Yintian was still alive, so Gu didn't need to use the blood test. He only needed to use the blood test. The so-called blood fusion method was the most common method of blood identification. Dripping two people's blood into a bowl of clear water to see if the two drops of blood would fuse together. If they fused together, then they were related by blood. If they didn't, then they weren't relatives. This method was also wrong, because no matter whose blood it was, two people, or many people, or even animal and human blood, it could fuse together in the end. If Gu Yintian agreed to Gu Qixiao's blood test, then Gu Qixiao would definitely win. Han Yunqi still couldn't imagine or believe that Gu was really Gu Yuntian's son. She only knew that if Gu won, then things would be much easier for them. "Father," Gu Qixiao called out sweetly again. "Do you dare?" "Yes." Gu Yintian agreed just like that. Han Yunqi firmly believed that Gu wouldn't lie in this situation because the price of lying was too high. Then where did Gu Yuntian's confidence come from? "Someone, bring a bowl of water." Gu Yintian was very straightforward. A complicated look flashed past Gu's eyes. He seemed to be surprised by Gu Yuntian's attitude, but he still insisted. He bit his finger first. The water was quickly brought over. Seeing that Gu was about to drip his blood in, Han Yunqi was worried and quickly stopped him. "Old man, wait." The moment Han Yunqi spoke, everyone looked over. Luckily, she was in disguise and had purposely pretended to have a hoarse voice. Ignoring everyone's scrutinizing eyes, she strode forward and tasted the water. After confirming that there was no salt or acid added, she was relieved. Although any blood could fuse together in water, if the water was tampered with and some acid or salt was added, the blood would solidify and not move. It would never be able to fuse. Gu Yintian agreed so easily, so she naturally had to help Gu guard against this. Han Yunqi tasted it and found that there was nothing wrong with the water. It was really water. Now Han Yunqi was at a loss as well. Which one of them was lying? "And who are you?" Gu Yintian coldly looked at Han Yunqi. "You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.